Good evening. It's 6 o'clock and we will begin, and welcome to the September 6th governing body meeting. If you will give your attention to Councilman Dobler, who will provide the invocation, stand as you are able, and then remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilman Dobler.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to ask Mr. Joseph Ledbetter, a veteran, to come forward and give the invocation. Joe?
Thank you, Neil, governing body. In the book of Proverbs, it talks about wisdom as a principal thing, so that's what I'm going to talk about in this prayer, and thank you for inviting me. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for this council. I want to thank you for this governing body. I want to thank you that you provide them with great wisdom tonight as they consider the matters of state and the matters of budget and the weighty matters that are before them, as well as a very long agenda. So I'll keep this short since there is a long agenda, and I just thank you, Lord, for blessing this body and blessing this city. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'll call this meeting to order, and I'll ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Mayor Padilla.
Here.
Council members Hiller. Here. Valdivia Acala. Here. Ortiz. Here. Emerson.
Here.
Hale.
Here.
Nager. Here. Dobler.
Here.
Duncan.
Here.
And Lesser.
Here.
We have 10 present.
Roll call having been called, move on to appointments. Recognize City Clerk, please.
A is a board appointment recommending the appointment of Toby Taggart to the Board of Building and Fire Appeals for a term ending December 6, 2024. B is a board appointment recommending the appointment of Matthew Wilson to the Shawnee County Community Corrections Advisory Board for a term ending September 6, 2024. C is a board appointment recommending the appointment of Scott Sodato to the Shawnee County Juvenile Corrections Advisory Board for an unexpired term ending September 6, 2025.
Okay, you've heard the appointments read. Entertain a motion. Have a motion to approve from Councilwoman Hiller, second from Councilman Kell. If you'll call the roll, please.
Councilmember Hiller.
Yes.
Valdivia Acala.
Yes.
Ortiz.
Yes.
Emerson.
Yes.
Kale.
Yes.
Nager.
Yes.
Dobler.
Yes.
Duncan.
Yes.
And Lesser.
Yes.
We have 9 yes, motion carries.
Okay, motion's been carried. I ask all of those who are present, Mr. Taggart, Mr. Wilson, or Mr. Sayano, if you're present in the audience, if you'd please stand so we can recognize you and acknowledge your volunteer. Thank you very much. I want to make sure we give time to recognize people who step forward to serve in any capacity to help our city. We'll move on to item number 3, is the consent agenda. So I ask the clerk to read, please.
A is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Sylvia Ortiz granting Augusta Munoz an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at seat concerning notice prohibitions. C is an ordinance introduced by Interim City Manager William E. Cochran allowing and approving city expenditures for the period of June 25 through June 29, 2022, and enumerating said expenditures therein. C is an ordinance introduced by Interim City Manager Bill Cochran designating a portion of the Crosby Place parking garage as temporarily exempt from the provisions of KSA 41719D and TMC 915020E. D is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Karen Hiller approving a special event known as the Lifehouse Poker Run. E is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Sylvia Ortiz granting Fellowship Highcrest an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at seat concerning noise prohibitions. F is approval of a development traffic engineering services on-call consulting contract to include developments, plan reviews, site plan reviews, traffic impact study reviews, and various other requests from the City Planning Department that require traffic engineering expertise. G is approval of a non-development projects traffic engineering services on-call contract with Alfred Benish and Company to include an on-call traffic engineering services for non-development projects and various other requests that require traffic engineering expertise. H is approval of a non-development projects traffic engineering on-call services contract with WSP USA Incorporated to include an on-call traffic engineering services for non-development projects and various other requests that require traffic engineering expertise. I is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Karen Hiller granting Brew Bank an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka, Section 945-150 at seat concerning noise prohibitions. J is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Karen Hiller approving a special event known as the Brew Bank Birthday Bash. K are minutes of the regular meeting of August 9, 2022 and August 16, 2022. There are no applications. And M is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Hannah Nager granting Valley Park NAA an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at seat concerning noise prohibitions.
Okay, the body has heard the consent agenda as read, and the chair will entertain a motion.
Move for approval?
Move for approval from Councilwoman Nager, second from
Well
Councilman
done to the clerk.
Kell. I might note also that Councilwoman Ortiz has joined us, because I don't know that you were online when we first started, Councilwoman. Okay, we have a motion and a second. If you'll call the roll, please.
Councilmembers Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes, I'm here, Mayor.
Emerson,
Yes.
Kale,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Lesser,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
and Councilmember Hiller.
Yes.
We have 10 yes, motion carries.
Motion been carried. We'll move on to agenda item number 4, action items. If the clerk would read.
A is a public hearing to consider a comment from the public concerning the governing body's consideration whether to exceed the TMTA's revenue neutral rate of 3.852 and impose a proposed tax rate of 4.2 mils. And a resolution introduced by interim city manager William E. Cochran to levy a property tax rate on behalf of the Topeka Metro Transit Authority, TMTA, that exceeds the revenue neutral rate.
Okay, it's appropriate for me to count on the city manager before I open the public hearing.
Yeah, tonight is just a public hearing on that, and I'll turn it over to you for opening that up.
All right, for this item, and we have three of them this evening, I will open up a public hearing and allow public comment on these. So, for this action item number 4, at this time, I will open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone present who would like to speak to the matter. Second time. Do you have a raised hand? Okay. If you'll step forward, please. If you'll identify yourself.
Karen Tyson.
Miss, go ahead, proceed, ma'am.
Yes, I am here to oppose the increase, and I hope that you will all vote no on increasing property taxes for the city of Topeka. Thank you.
I'll ask also a second time. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak to this matter? And for a third time, is there anyone here who would like to speak to this matter? Okay. And close the public hearing on action item 4A. Now, I recognize anybody on the governing body who may have comment on this item. Anyone on the governing body? Okay. Is there a motion to approve this resolution? Councilwoman Valdivia Aquila.
Motion to approve.
Okay, motion to approve. Is there a second? Second by Councilman Lesser. Madam Clerk?
I'm sorry, Mayor.
Comment?
Yes, if I could ask the city attorney, Stanley, I thought this was just a hearing about whether they can exceed.
We do the hearing, and then you proceed to a roll call vote on whether or not you would like to vote to exceed the revenue neutral rate by passage of a resolution. Then once you've decided if you would like to, then you proceed to the budget hearing. But first you have to vote on the revenue neutral rate before you can have a budget hearing, and then next week pass the budget.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Surely. Councilwoman Hiller.
Just to follow up with that, what that means is that's a cap. If they come in with less than that, that's okay, or as much as that.
You're voting to exceed the revenue neutral rate at the amount proposed in the resolution, which would be the 4.2 mils. During the budget hearing, you could choose to do a lower amount, but that is your cap. You couldn't go higher than the 4.2 mils.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Further comment? Deputy Mayor.
And just, I guess, point of this first one is for the TMTA only, correct? Right, and then we'll do the one on the city. Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none now, I'll call for the roll call vote.
Councilmembers Ortiz?
Yes.
Emerson?
Yes.
Hale?
Yes.
Nager?
Yes.
Dobler?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Lesser?
Yes.
Mayor Padilla?
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller?
Yes.
And Valdivia Akla?
Yes.
We have 10 yes, motion carries.
Okay, the motion's been carried, and we'll move to action item 4B, which is also another public hearing and resolution. Madam Clerk.
B is a public hearing to consider comment from the public concerning the governing body's consideration of adopting a budget for 2023 that exceeds the R&R, which is 36.623. Resolution, and a resolution introduced by interim city manager William E. Cochran to levy a property tax rate that exceeds the city of Topeka's revenue neutral rate.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager.
Same as last.
Okay. At this time, I will open the public hearing and ask if there is anyone who would like to speak to this matter. That is action item 4B. At this time, is there anyone who would like to speak to the matter? And for a third time, is there anyone who would like to speak to the matter? Seeing none, I close the hearing, and we will move now to recognizing the governing body for any comments. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I will be voting yes on this evening. I guess I do want to remind the public that we are, however, looking at a budget that lowers the mill levy, and as I said many months ago, and will continue to hold firm, I will not vote for any budget that doesn't hold to what we've been working on in that direction. So, but I will vote yes on this portion of it this evening. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Further comments? Nothing on screen. Is there a motion to approve the resolution? I have a motion to approve from Councilman Dobler and a second from Councilwoman Ortiz. Madam Clerk, if you call the roll vote.
Councilmembers Emerson?
Yes.
Hale?
Yes.
Nager?
Yes.
Dobler?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Lesser?
Yes.
Mayor Padilla?
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller?
Yes.
Valdivia Akla?
Yes.
And Ortiz?
Yes.
We have 10 yes, motion carries.
Okay, the resolution's been carried. Now we'll move on to 4C, which is also another public hearing on the 2023 budget. Madam Clerk?
C is a public hearing for the purpose of hearing and answering objections of taxpayers relating to the proposed City of Topeka 2023 operating budget.
Okay.
Mayor, governing body, this is a public hearing, like I said, on the budget, to gain input from the public and also additional input from council members.
Okay. At this time, I will open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone present who would like to speak to this matter. I see a couple hands. Go ahead, sir. Come forward, and then Ms. Tyson. Would you please Identify yourself, sir.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor Padilla and governing body. I am Jeff Parker. I am current president of the Board of Trustees for the Topeka Performing Arts Center. And I actually have quite a few of our board members here. Stand up. You can see we've got some pretty good board members here, and I wanted to reach out to you today and just introduce myself. I'm new to all of this, so I'm a rookie. Have pity on me here. Really, I wanted to reach out first and just say, really, there's three things I'd like to address. One, I want to express gratitude. We, the board, and I, thank you for supporting the Topeka Performing Arts Center. All of the things that you've done, keeping the lights on, the wonderful facility that we have, and the monies that are in the budget for our operations, which are absolutely critical to our existence, honestly. So most community facilities like this require civic participation, and we very much appreciate what the city of Topeka does. The second thing I'd like to address really is seeking guidance. So not being involved with this organization before, I haven't ever appeared before the city council. This is all new to me. And so I would like to establish a relationship with you and be able to maybe draw on you for some guidance on the best times and venues for us to discuss, challenges that we have. Deferred maintenance on the building, we have some serious issues. I don't know whether they're capital things or whether they're building maintenance things. And I think that as a board, we could use some guidance on the best way to interact with you, the governing body. And so, obviously, as we put off maintenance to the building, eventually things become capital concerns. And so at this point, I think that we really need to interact with you guys on a real strong basis, and I look forward to engaging with each of you. And then lastly, I was going to call it the 3 Gs, so gratitude and guidance, and I'd like to, gastronomy, maybe. I'd like to invite you to dinner. We're in the same building, it's your building. I think that you used to have dinner before the meetings occasionally, and I'd like to invite you, like some meeting time perhaps in October. Come have dinner with us in our facility. We'll give you a cool tour of the building. And anyway.
You've got a minute.
Oh, I've got 1 minute. Okay. Really, that's about all I had to say. And I very much, again, appreciate your time, and thank you for listening. And thank you for the amount that is in the budget. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Tyson?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm not a public speaker, you guys. I do get nervous, and I appreciate all your effort and all your work. But what I'm here to represent is the taxpayer. I've talked to so many people that literally are deciding, do we pay our property tax? Do we buy medicine? Do we pay for food? It is that drastic in the state of Kansas now. It is not something that you think of when you're in these meetings in these rooms, but think about it when you're going door to door and talking to your constituents and who we're serving. We absolutely need to keep property taxes as low as possible. And your votes, I know, are being recorded, and they will be sent to the state. They are going to be posted on a website publicly. So it's about transparency. And it's the first time in the state of Kansas people can come and speak before their taxes increase. They can be heard before their taxes increase. So I thank you so much for this opportunity. I please ask each of you to vote no on the revenue neutral rate increase. I ask you to keep the taxes, the tax dollar amount, the same as it was the previous year. You can adjust the pools of money as needed as a governing body, but please keep those taxpayers in mind who are truly struggling. We did freeze property tax for low-income seniors and disabled veterans. That's a help. But you guys can help out too by keeping the city property taxes lower. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. For a third time, to make sure I didn't miss anyone, is there anyone else who would like to speak to this matter? And seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Now, ask the governing body for a comment
Yeah,
for,
Joe is passing, but I don't see Shamika.
okay. Well, I'll just reopen the hearing, as there are two people here that apparently I didn't see.
Shamika.
Shamika Sims. Shamika Sims? Is she online? No, okay. And Mr. Ledbetter?
Thank you, governing body. I do support the lowering of the mill levy by 1 mil plus that is being proposed. I always am concerned that we're fully funding the police department. I know we're doing that under this budget. One of the things I'm concerned about, though, is the taking on of more debt. And so I have said this for several years, and I continue to speak it. I do think that we need to actually sell off some of our private or our publicly owned parking garages. I think we're looking at as much as $20 million to fix a variety of them, and I would rather see a private developer bear that burden and get those parking garages that would be sold, whatever ones they are, back on the, actually put on the public tax rolls, which would help them pay taxes as well. So that's all. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I don't see any additional on the list, so I'll reclose the hearing again. And now ask the governing body members for any comments or questions they have. Councilwoman Hiller.
Just one for the record. I appreciate the senator's comments, but this body has, as far as I know, my whole life, considered whether or not to raise and lower the tax rate every year and considered public input on that. So didn't want people to think it was the first time we did it. Thank you.
Further comment from the governing body? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the resolution?
This actually is considered next week.
Next week?
The budget will be approved next week. So,
Yeah. We'll move on now to action item 4D, another public hearing.
D is a public hearing regarding a proposed loan in the amount not to exceed $27,433,000 to be taken by the city of Topeka from the Kansas Water Pollution Control Revolving Fund administered by the Kansas Department of Health and Environment pursuant to KSA 65163C at SEEK. And a resolution introduced by interim city manager William E. Cochran authorizing the filing of an application with the Kansas Department of Health and Environment for a loan under the Kansas Water Pollution Control Revolving Fund Act.
City manager?
Mayor, governing body, I do have staff available to answer questions on this if there are any at this point.
Councilman Dober? Oh, do I need to open the public hearing first? Okay. I will, at this time, open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone present who would like to speak to the matter. Is there anyone present who would like to speak to the matter? And for a third time, is there anyone present who would like to speak to the matter? Seeing none, hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. And now move to governing body members, Councilman Dobler.
Thank you, Mayor, and this probably would be, apply to both item D and E. Just a quick recap on, from Mr. Wade perhaps, on the difference between the interest rate for a revolving loan fund term. Why is it beneficial to the city of Topeka to use the revolving loan fund as opposed to normal revenue bonds?
Councilman, if it's okay, I'd like Deputy Director Matthews to address that.
Good evening. That is a good question. The SRF loan program right now is running about a 2% lower interest rate for a 20-year amortization loan than we would get with a market rate with a revenue bond over 30 years.
That's a really good answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further questions from the governing body? Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Matthews, is it possible to, do we have other revenue bonds that right now are higher? And if so, is it possible to refinance through this?
No, sir. The program requires any projects for this financing to not have been started yet. So they're looking for new projects early in the design process. So we are not able to use this for refinancing.
I was afraid of that. Okay. Thank you.
Further questions from the governing body? Okay. Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the resolution? I have a motion to approve by Councilman Kell, second by Councilman Dobler. If you would call the vote, please.
Councilmembers Kell,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Lesser,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
and Emerson.
Yes.
We have 10 yes, motion carries.
Okay, motion carried. We move on to item 4E, which is another public hearing. Madam Clerk, if you'll read.
E is a public hearing regarding the proposed loan in the amount not to exceed $39,105,205 to be taken by the City of Topeka from the Kansas Public Water Supply Loan Fund, administered by the Kansas Department of Health and Environment pursuant to KSA 65163C at SEEK, and a resolution introduced by interim city manager William E. Cochran authorizing the completion of an application with the Kansas Department of Health and Environment regarding a loan under the Kansas Water Supply Loan Fund.
City Manager.
Mayor, governing body, this is basically falls in line with the one before, and so again, staff is available for questions.
Okay. So at this time on item 4E, I will open a public hearing and ask if there's anyone present who would like to speak to the matter. For a second time, is there anyone present who would like to speak to the matter? And for a third time, is there anyone present who would like to speak to the matter? Seeing none, I want to make sure this time. We close the public hearing and recognize anybody on the governing body who would like to make comment or have any comment to make. Okay? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve? Motion to approve by Councilwoman Valdivia Aquila, second by Councilman Kell. If you'll call the roll, please.
Councilmembers Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Lesser,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
and Kell.
Yes.
We have 10 yes, motion carries.
Okay. Motion has been carried, and we'll move to item 4F, if the clerk would read.
F is an ordinance introduced by the Policy and Finance Committee concerning employee residency requirements, amending City of Topeka Code Section 2-110-020.
City Manager.
Mayor, governing body, again, this is action item. Last time we had conversation referenced the city employee residency requirement, and so I believe there are several conversations to be had from council members, so at this, I will turn it back over to you, sir.
Okay. Before we move into a motion to adopt the ordinance, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I was just gonna give an update from our last conversation when we discussed this. Nothing else has changed except one provision which was discussed, which would put a sunset on it of December 31st, 2027. We also went ahead and built in the requirement that you shall not be required to be a bona fide resident of Shawnee County if in 2027 they decide to let the sunset, or continue the sunset or lapse it, then anyone who moved in the day before isn't gonna have to suddenly move into the city. So we've built that in to take that decision kind of out of the hands of the governing body in 5 years. But it does have that sunset clause already put into this draft that we discussed last week. So thank you, Mayor.
I was going to ask you for that because I think that was a concern. I know I had one too, and others did too. Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of things. One is, I know that we got the number the other day for how many folks lived in Topeka, how many folks lived in the county, how many total folks we have as city employees. My question is, and I think I know the answer, but I just want to make sure I ask it, has there ever been any type of numbers pushed out as to what we are losing in money? I mean, I know that's really a long shot, like, if they rent, if they own, all of this, but what kind of projections have ever been put out for the money that would be lost with people not living within the city limits? That's one question that you know of, Mayor, or anybody.
City Manager.
Councilwoman, there's not been a study done like that, and mainly for the reason that since it was a charter ordinance that passed back when they were allowed to move to the county, it has never been done. Doesn't mean it couldn't be done, I'm just saying it has not been done.
Okay, thank you. Then the other question I have, because let me just say, I seriously doubt in any way that I can support this. I understand it's only going to be for 5 years out, but who knows who will be on council then, and if they will want to extend it out or not. I also understand that the way that the world is changing now, and with the increasing in virtual work, how that makes for much more flexibility. I understand the conundrum of not being able to find enough folks within the city limits that put a damper on hiring. But folks in my district, I have not talked to anyone that supported this residency being done away with, first and foremost, because of the rub that it creates with the tax money going outside of the city and not being spent within the city. I can see both ways in it, but that's what I've been hearing in my district. And I'm wondering, this may be a question for a city attorney, does the city have the capacity to put an earnings tax on those that live outside the city limits, or is that something that the state has to take up and then cities can determine if they want to act upon it?
Well, you wouldn't be able to do an earning tax on people that live outside the city because your jurisdiction would only be over residents. The power of taxation without representation, you have to represent the people that you're taxing. So off the top of my head, I would say that no, you probably can't do an earnings tax on people that live outside the city. Generally, earnings taxes are on income earned outside the city, but people that live here, because you're representing the people you're taxing. Also, I'd have to do research, but I don't believe you could tax just employees and not tax everyone as a whole. You couldn't single out just an employee and say, we're going to specifically tax you. That would be more likely to be an excise tax, which would be an illegal tax.
Got it. Well, and I didn't know if I was actually using that earnings tax was actually the correct verbiage. I don't know if there's any kind of verbiage that I'm not using that might be a possibility. And definitely, if it's something that would have to be levied across the city, then that's not what I'm looking at. I was just asking specifically.
I think what you could do would not necessarily be a tax, but you could differentiate pay based off if you live, give bonuses for living inside, or deduct pay for living outside. It wouldn't be a tax per se, it would be more about negotiating your employee benefits. You'd want to make sure that it was on a non-discriminatory reason, such as living inside the city or outside the city. There's potential options there that you could do, but that would be more from a benefit side rather than a taxation side.
Okay. Thank you for that, City Attorney. I mean, I would definitely be down in the future to have those conversations, but if this is going to put, a 5-year lock-in, then, yeah, this is something I cannot support. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Emerson and then Councilman Kell.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess just to throw in a little bit I know, Kansas City, Missouri has an earnings tax, and I think Kansas does as well. If you come and play a professional sport here and win money, you file a Kansas return based on the money you earn while you're in Kansas, I believe. I know a lot of states that's it, so it's a mess for professional athletes. But as I understand it, Kansas law does not allow earnings tax to be imposed like Missouri does. Now, if anybody knows anybody in the legislature, we could get that enacted. But I'm with you too. It gives me pause too, because it's tough because people are getting paid with that revenue, but then they're not contributing. And also there's a little bit of, if you care as much if you don't live here, well, if we're wasting money on something else, I'm not paying taxes. I don't think that's the case with majority of employees, but it is easier to care when you're the one paying for it. So anyway, thank you.
Councilman Kell.
Excuse me. Initially, I was against this, and then I started really thinking about it and started thinking personally. I worked in Lansing, Kansas for over a year, drove from Topeka to Lansing every day, got my gas here in Topeka because it was cheaper than Lansing. Did all my shopping here in Topeka. So there's, I don't think we're going to be losing anything, and if anything, we might actually gain some new residents because they may not like the commute anymore. So it's going to be a wash a lot of times anyways with when you do something like this. Is like, we have plenty of city citizens of Topeka that work outside of Topeka but bring their money right back here. So it's just, like I said, before I was against it. I kind of wanted the one clause in there. The more I thought about it and this initially just looked at myself, I was like, wait a second, I was one of these people that, drove an hour, but all my money was spent here, so it's going to be a wash, like you said, with your study there. So trying to do a study, I think that'd be almost hard to even compute in the long run. Thank you.
Councilman Dobrik.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to propose an amendment. First of all, I appreciate the 5-year sunset being put in. I think that makes a lot of sense, as we discussed a couple of weeks ago. One thing that concerns me is we've got some critical positions at a department head level that have not been filled, and we just have a tough time filling them. And I don't want to strike the requirement for department heads to live in Shawnee County, I think is the way it says now, but I would like to put something in that would give the city manager the right to waive the residency requirement for a department director, and I did pass this out. Hopefully everybody has a copy if you're here. And let me just read my proposed amendment. It would say, notwithstanding subsection B, I didn't really write this. The city manager may waive the county residency requirement for a department director if the position remains unfilled after 60 days from the date the position or vacancy was posted on the city's website. So that's the city manager making the decision, and the human resources director determines that removing the county residency requirement may facilitate filling the position. So that's two people it would take to meet that requirement. And I'll just submit that for consideration. Thank you, Mayor. I'll make that motion.
You make a motion to amend. Is there a second to amend? Councilwoman Hiller? Okay. We can vote now on the amendment, or do we vote on the ordinance as amended?
Well, no one actually motioned to move the ordinance, so was your motion perhaps to move the ordinance as amended?
Move the ordinance, yes.
Okay. State your motion again.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay. There's a motion. Is there a second to approve?
Second.
Second by Deputy Mayor.
Now your motion to add the
Now-
amendment, correct?
Now I'll make a motion to amend
Okay.
to the language I indicated.
Same second?
No.
Same
Second
second
over
is
there.
fine.
Okay. Motion to amend from Councilman Dobler and a second from Councilwoman Hiller. Further discussion, Councilman Kell?
I would like to move that the 45 minutes go to an hour. That gets us to the Kansas-Missouri line on the Kansas City side and opens it up with like the department head wise, because we're running into higher up issues in our city with the, well, I thought we discussed your, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry, I'm sorry. I thought we were discussing the main motion. Sorry, you're right.
What's being passed out here now?
I have a couple amendments, too.
Okay.
when we
I
get
do
done
have a
with this
question
one.
relating to this amendment. And I'm fine with this, but how long do we post a job traditionally? I mean, till it's filled, or do we usually put a limit?
No, usually on jobs like that, they're posted till filled, but what we do is as we're going along, 30 days, we start reviewing applications or something like that, but they're posted until they're filled for the most part.
Okay, so 60 days then gives us the time to decide. Okay, that's why I was trying to see where 60 days fit into how we usually post, so thank you.
Councilwoman Nager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a question about this amendment. Councilmember Dobler, is there a provision within this measure to go ahead and give department heads a certain amount of time to move into the county? Or is it to go ahead and just, this has been, this person, this circumstance has been waived, and so that employee then no longer has to go ahead and live within the city limits?
Yeah, Councilwoman, I think that provision is already in the general language, so for any department head position, they have a certain amount of time to move in, and I think that can be extended or something. This amendment would waive the requirement. So once that person was hired, they would not be subject to that requirement until they left city employment.
Sounds good. So it would basically, they would just fall under the same guidelines as other employees, rather than the department head employees, once they got the waiver from the city manager and HR.
That's right. That's
Thank you.
correct.
That's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Further questions? Further amendments?
Do we need to vote on this
No,
one
no.
first? Okay.
Okay, we need to vote on the ordinance as amended.
No, just the amendment.
Just the amendment? Okay. All right, just the amendment from Councilman Dobler. Hope you're keeping track of this, Amanda.
Councilmembers Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Lesser. Yes. Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Akala,
No.
Ortiz,
No.
Emerson,
Yes.
Kale,
Yes.
and Nager.
Yes.
Okay, we have 8 yes with Councilmembers Valdivia Akala and Ortiz voting no. The motion carries.
Okay, the motion carries. Now, let's move forward. Councilman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I have two, and did they get it sent to them? Those are online.
Two of them?
Those are in front of you to pass out.
No, I passed out the paper copies. Did the parties that are online get it?
No, I didn't send them.
Okay. I have two, and Councilman Kell, I think I picked up on your concern and addressed it in a little different way. The first one that you can see in front of you is the very first residency required section. After our conversation last week, what I realized was troubling me was that in the changes that we had phrased as they were, we didn't ever say we really want everybody to live in the city limits, that's the desire of the council. So and I also, similar to Councilman Kell, had a little concern about the Kansas limit simply because of how close Kansas City, Missouri is. So my first amendment is to change item A to say all employees are encouraged to live inside the city limits of the city of Topeka. I can go to the second one if you want, Mayor.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
The second one, on page 2, the critical response language that we had stated some specific times. I felt like we needed to just get out of that box a little bit, and I substituted 2 paragraphs, one about critical response time and one about positions that required, in the opinion of the city manager, experiential knowledge such that could only be gained by living in the city. Both to be controlled by language in a job description. So for critical response time, the proposed amendment would say employees employed in critical response time position or any others that require immediate physical presence on an as-needed basis may be required to live within a fixed maximum response time from an identified point of report. Such a requirement shall be identified in the job description and will be a condition of employment. The amount of time allowed for the employee to establish such residence shall be set by the city manager and provided to the employee in writing. It seemed to me that way it's clear. If it's in the job description, then the person knows about it when they apply for the job. It allows the city manager, or certainly designating that authority to the department head or HR, to negotiate whatever is appropriate in terms of getting somebody into that time frame if they don't already live close enough. The second one, related, says employees who work in job positions that require experiential knowledge of the city that can only be gained by living in the community in addition to working in it may be required to live in the city as a condition of employment. Similar to the other one, such a requirement shall be identified in the job description and will be a condition of employment. The amount of time allowed for the employee to establish such residence shall be set by the city manager and provided to the employee in writing. So what these two do is tie that requirement to the job duties and to performance rather than just an arbitrary measure. So I would propose that substitution of the language that's in D for those 2 substitute paragraphs, whenever the time is right to do that.
I guess the time is right now.
Okay.
If you're going to make a motion to,
I'll start with the second ones and move that the language on page 2 of the handout, the new language be substituted for the existing language.
there's a motion to amend to the wording that Councilwoman Hiller has presented to us. Is there a second? And second, Councilman Dobler. For discussion? Councilman Emerson?
Thank you, Mayor. Councilwoman Hiller, first of all, thank you for doing this. I actually think these are pretty thoughtful amendments. The only thing I don't understand is, I'm not going to be able to say this word, experiential knowledge. What do you see as the jobs that might be that?
I'm not sure, if it's a community engagement maybe, or customer service, somebody that in a position where there was a sense that they needed to understand about all the churches and the daycares and the shopping centers and so on. I put it in there because I understand the why that people were looking at that. Honestly, we all know people that don't live here that know this city really, really well, and people that do live here that don't. So I wanted it to be performance-based if we were gonna have any requirement like that, that the person would need to demonstrate that not only live here, but demonstrate that they knew it.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, that was partly my question, and I had talked to Councilmember Kell about some of his concerns with the time issue. My problem is, and I mean this with respect, it's your amendment, and if you can't define what that knowledge base is for that position, who then are we supposed to entrust to make the definition of what positions are supposed to have experiential knowledge if we can't tonight, as the governing body members, define what those positions are? And that becomes my concern, is that then it is used as a crutch to say, well, I guess someone will define it, and then we have to debate later, well, why did you define that? Why? And that is my concern, is that it's very broad in that definition. So that's my only concern with this amendment. Thank you.
And my response to that, if that was directed at me, was that I wanted to leave that window there rather than close it. And so that it's there in 5 years when we look at it again, or when somebody looks at it again, if it turns out that it wasn't needed or relevant, at least the option is there for city manager, department heads to make that provision for a job if it seems essential.
Councilman Lesser?
Thank you. My first question is directed to City Attorney Stanley. Do we have I don't have it in front of me, do we have what's the definition of critical response position?
Going off the top of my head, which is always a little dangerous, but I believe critical response is defined in our personnel code, and it deals with someone who has to respond because of emergencies within so long, like the person that does the pipe in the ground when it breaks and the water line's breaking, or the police officer, but I believe it's defined in our personnel code, but if I'm wrong, I apologize in advance.
I would say that it's safe to say that it includes police and fire.
Correct.
Okay.
Those are also defined in their union contracts, as well as critical response time employees.
And what are the since I don't have them in front of me as well, what are the critical response times in the union, in the contract for fire and for PD?
I know PD is 30 minutes currently. I am not sure on fire, but I see the chief in the back. He might know off the top of his head, and he says it's also 30. Currently, water is 45 in their contract.
Thank you. I would venture to guess that the last paragraph as a city attorney, as being as ambiguous, probably gives you pause.
Suppose it depends on which side of the ambiguity you want to be on. If you would like it to be really broad, then it's great. If you want fine definitions, it is troublesome.
You are an attorney.
I mean, if you want lots of flexibility to require inside the city limits, that gives you a lot of flexibility.
I guess what my point is,
The arguments from the union, for example, grievances, if you had a union position that was suddenly experiential knowledge, I could see potential grievances out of that.
I guess that's where I'm going at it, is if we go down the road and someone gets determined to be as such and someone else gets determined to not be, are we not open up for, without a clear, I never like ambiguity in
I think in your management and executive, because it'll be in the job description, it's pretty low risk. But when it comes to union contracts, I never like to bet on what will get grieved. And so I think management and executive employees, probably fairly low risk.
union, the risk becomes higher.
And it's who, am I reading it correctly that when the city manager would be the one then that makes this determination whether or not the individual meets the definition of important?
Yes, that would be my interpretation, that ultimately the city manager decides what is allowed in a job description and who this would ultimately apply to.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Councilman Kell.
I definitely do like the part about the, in the job description, because I was looking at a couple of different position descriptions, and we don't have any of that information on the position description. We actually don't even say that you have to be, a Shawnee County resident, it looks like, in any of this stuff. So we're kind of not even putting it out there, so we're almost kind of wasting people's time with applying for jobs that they might not even know they're not even eligible for, or find out they have to move to get the job. So, guys, it's looking like the Director of Public Works has nothing in any information on the posting for any of this kind of stuff that's been discussed. It's on the books now.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Appreciate that affirmation. I did visit with the city attorney, reviewed and helped work on the wording of this and the issue of putting the city manager in there so that there could be consistency and department heads wouldn't be like making up their minds on their own and having people find out later. Also with the job description in there for exactly what you were saying, so people know. Also that puts it into the labor negotiations if it's being considered, which should help all the way around for people to know, and if it needs to be negotiated, have that done.
City manager and then Councilman Dobler.
Mayor and government body, when we talk about position descriptions at the current time, there are no residencies in those job descriptions because currently we have the policy you have to live in the county. And so a lot, position descriptions and like that will have to be changed, they will have to be altered if this is adopted. And then when we talk about critical response positions, primary, the easiest one example to use would be the response team with the big police department. When you apply for that position, you know you have a certain response time. That is in the policy of the department. And so an officer would have to make the determination if they live an hour away and they want to be on the response team, they got to move to be in compliance of the policy and procedure for that particular job. And so that'll be something that the employee has to make that determination as to where they want to live. Is that position important enough for me that I want to move my family within that distance? Or do I want to live in this area because I want to do that in the future? So those will be the things that, and policy and procedure outlines critical response for each department and who those positions are. And so the employee knows what that is before they put in for those positions.
Councilman?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I'm a little confused and maybe I missed just a bit of the discussion earlier. So in this last paragraph, the way I read it, the only determination the city manager makes is the amount of time for the employee to establish residence. Who makes the decision on what positions require that special knowledge?
Experience.
Yeah, I guess that's the question. Who in the city determines that? Maybe a question for Councilwoman Hiller. What do you have in mind there?
Oh, well, my understanding from the conversation with the city attorney is that since the city manager is responsible for everything, that if you're going to name anybody, you name the city manager, because that person, once we set whatever overall policy we do, is responsible to make sure it gets done and done right.
Okay. So by default, it's the city manager? I mean, we don't need
Yeah. Rather than us
Okay.
naming who, other than that, it'd probably be the HR director and in consultation with department heads to get them updated.
If I may take a turn at this, you know, this seems to be as controversial as it was the first time around. And I don't see as many changes of mind really than what we had beforehand. And on the first vote, I voted not to remove the residency requirement and to keep it in place. I have said publicly that there have been a lot of discussions and things can change and conditions change. I think our working environment and employment challenges have changed. I think, for me anyway, the simplest solution that was offered by Deputy Mayor Duncan and then amended by Councilman Dobler, for me, answers a lot of questions. This amendment here, Councilwoman Heller, I appreciate your efforts and your work, and I know that you've been working with others to bring this out, but for me, it gets so far into definition and suppositions about what experiential knowledge of the city is. I could get that over the internet too. I didn't have to live in the city. I mean, we've experienced that with a lot of our candidates here recently who came to get the city manager job. They didn't live in the city, but they knew about the city, those who lived outside of Topeka. So I didn't have to live here to at least find out about the city. For me, I think that we've gone so far now down this road of trying to cover every little detail that this thing keeps growing and growing. And I think, much like the deputy mayor says, if you can't put a definition to it right now, will we be able to put definition to it 6 months from now? This doesn't mean that this is engraved in stone forever anyway. And I think that for us, as we continue these discussions, we can add one more piece here, add one more piece there. And before we get done with it, it'll be this thick, and nobody will really understand what we're trying to get accomplished. And I think what we're trying to accomplish is to increase our employee pool base, to bring people to work for the city of Topeka, to know that we appreciate their efforts here in the city of Topeka. I know the argument, and I made it too, about being paid by tax dollars and not living in Topeka, but those people still do contribute to the overall welfare of this community. So I don't hold it against them that they live outside of the city. For me, I cannot support this amendment as proposed. Thank you. Councilman Lesser.
Again, City Attorney Stanley, don't we kind of accomplish this already in the current language where it says unless a shorter response time is required at the discretion of the city manager? I mean, don't we kind of already address that right there?
I don't know that that incorporates that, now I can't say the word either, experiential knowledge, as it's been discussed tonight. If it's about knowing where churches are or NIAs, that doesn't require response time. But it is broad, as you've said. If a shorter response time is needed, if there's a real reason they need to live in our community, I think it could be pretty interpreted broader to include that. I don't think just needing to know where things are probably is a response time, though.
I guess what my point is, to me that the additional language becomes immaterial, and the word everybody has a hard time pronouncing tonight becomes immaterial because it says a shorter response time is required unless a shorter response time is required at the discretion. Discretion is discretion, correct?
Correct. You could interpret that pretty broadly and say a shorter response time is needed for X, Y, and Z, and I doubt you'd
Because-
ever be challenged in a job description.
Because when we go down to these other two, what I'm told is the qualities or qualifications or the special qualifications of these individuals are then determined that at such point by the discretion of the city manager, correct?
Correct, that is how it is worded.
And then such a job requirement, et cetera, on the second paragraph, the amount of time it shall be set by the, so I mean, there again, I mean, it seems to me that we've already accomplished with the word discretion of the city manager what we have in the ordinance. Discretion
think
means whatever I think.
Yes, and I guess that's what I was going to say. It just depends on who your city manager is, how broadly they want to use discretion, how broadly they don't, who your city attorney is, how
Right.
ambitious they
My
are.
point being is, they're all three about discretion.
Correct, and all of that will determine whoever is in the seat and what discretion they choose to use.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Okay, I have a response, and I think I should amend the motion, maybe that will help. One thing is to point out that the current language, which was in there before, that is stricken on the draft that you have, limits the allowance of a response time only to critical response time public safety positions. We have other jobs now that have response time requirements. And so the reason for the alternate paragraph on the response time was to make sure that we were allowing whatever positions city manager and key staff felt needed response times. If you look at the first line, or line number 31 and 32, the language that we started with tonight says employees employed in a critical response time public safety position as defined by the Department of HR, and then it's very specific on how many months it takes and what the limits of the time are. So my intention with that second paragraph, lines 41 to 46, was to open that up to better reflect what we're doing today and allow our response time to be set that was based on the position. If the second paragraph is too confusing, I intended to just, again, leave that discretion if there was a reason that I didn't know about right now, that residency was critical for some other reason than response time. I wanted to put that language in there. If that's too troublesome, I'm okay with taking that extra paragraph out and amending my proposed amendment to just the paragraph between lines 41 and 46 about response time.
Councilman Anderson.
Point of information on that. So if she wants to do that, city attorney, would her original second have to agree to that, right?
If you wanted it to be a friendly motion, just as a point of clarification, though, it gets a little confusing in these red lines. The motion that is on the floor, critical response time, is not simply public safety positions. If you look at the motion in your agenda packet, the original ordinance you're amending was specific to public safety. The motion that's currently on the floor opens that up to all critical response time, not just public safety. Hard to see in this amendment with the red lines and the strikeouts.
Okay.
And then, yes, she could make a friendly motion if her second agreed to make that amendment.
Yeah,
Councilman Dobler.
I will do whatever I need to do.
See, I'm not alone in the forest, am I?
So start 47 to 52.
Strike 47 through 52, the amendment would just be to substitute lines 41 through 46 for the original language.
Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilwoman, and I will say, and I don't know who wrote the original language, so pardon me for saying so, but I like that yours basically says, I think, a lot of what this says, just in fewer words, so I think it's more succinct, and I actually like the amended language, and sorry, city attorney, if you wrote that. I think you were operating within a bunch of old stuff here, so I like I like what Councilwoman Hiller and you came up with, so.
Hate what I do at school.
So anyway, so I am supportive of that, so, thank you.
Okay, so we're at that point now that she has to make that friendly amendment and,
I think she already has.
Yep.
okay, and second is good. Okay, and do we vote now on that as amended?
Yes, the amendment,
And, pardon?
the amendment,
Yes.
I guess
the amendment.
the amendment, on the amendment. And City Attorney, I want to make sure on this. It says in my notes here that I do vote on this, but do I not?
No, this is a home rule ordinance, so you don't
Sorry.
vote, you can vote on the amendments to the ordinance, but not on the final ordinance.
Gotcha. It's a confusing note here I had there for me.
You can veto it if you want, I guess.
Yeah. I'll get that ready.
Okay, we're ready to vote.
If you'll call the roll then for the amendment.
Councilmembers Duncan,
Yes.
Lesser. Mayor Padilla,
No?
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
No.
Ortiz,
No.
Emerson,
Yes.
Kale,
Yes.
Nager,
No.
and Dobler.
Yes.
Okay, we have 6 yes, motion carries. We have Mayor Padilla, council members Valdivia Aquila, Ortiz, and Nager voting no.
Okay. So now are we, Councilwoman Hiller?
The last amendment that I had is all the way back up at the beginning, lines 15 and 16. It would simply be to substitute for the language that's there, a sentence that would say, all employees are encouraged to live inside the city limits of the city of Topeka.
Second.
You have a motion and a second by Deputy Mayor, Councilman Dobler.
I have no problem with the language that encourages people to live inside city limits, really. No enforcement of that. I guess I have a little concern with what's excluded, and that must be a bona fide resident of the state of Kansas. Originally, I didn't really think about it too much, but, and I know Missouri's not that far away, but it's Missouri, so. And I'm not sure I can support this with that still in. I think if, we went from city limits to Shawnee County, and now we're talking about state, I mean, can you live in?
Yeah, North America.
Yeah, continental U.S. I guess, maybe you can live in Canada or Mexico or something, so, I don't know. It just seems like we ought to at least be in the same state. So, thank you, Mayor.
Deputy Mayor?
I mean, I guess I would offer, I don't know why both these things can't be true. I don't know why we can't say all employees must be bona fide residents of the state of Kansas and are encouraged to live inside the city limits of the city of Topeka. That would be my suggestion.
Councilwoman Hiller?
If I can explain, because I thought about it long and hard, and I realized, for instance, that all of us are part of spending $15,000 per head to use tax money to encourage people who are working remotely someplace else in the country or the world to live in Topeka, with some success. We also are trying very hard to hold on to stabilize our workforce, to hold on to employees, and so on. And so it would allow that restriction, aside from the Kansas City part, if someone's spouse had something happen with their family or their life that they needed or wanted to move elsewhere, but their job is one where they could work remotely, we wouldn't have to terminate that position right away, even if it was transitional. Obviously, a police officer has to be on the street, but somebody who's doing accounting in the finance department or who's even working in a call center can do their job from anywhere. We've learned that if we didn't know it before. And so it would force us to end the employment of someone who needed to move out of the area for some reason, and maybe we don't want to lose them. That And this doesn't really allow any exceptions, and so that was some of the thought that I had that caused me to suggest it. I think Councilman Kell mentioned earlier, you know, we want our people to be able to go elsewhere, but, you know, not allowing the same thing for our own residents, our own people.
Councilman Cal?
Yeah, I do get what the councilwoman is coming from, because I do have family experience with my uncle working for the water department. And, you know, 4 days a week, he lived with me for his last 6 months of employment to make sure he was keeping his residency in here, because his wife, my aunt, was the business that she was working for in Topeka shut down all of a sudden. They had to move to Kansas City. So that gave a little bit of transition time to his retirement. So it was, you know, well, prior to what we're talking about here, was this residency requirement of Shawnee County, but it was one of those things that 4 to 5 nights a week, my uncle was at my house because he wanted to make sure he was following the rules and be able to make it to retirement. So I kind of get where the councilman was going on that, because, you know, in those situations, we may be forcing someone out of something they've worked hard to get to, and you know, it can leave a bad taste in someone's mouth about working with us in the future and telling their friends and family to work for us. Thank you.
Further discussion? Okay. We have that as an amendment. Have you proposed that as an amendment?
I have, and it was seconded.
And you second it? Okay. Councilman Emerson?
Mayor, a late question here. I think, was it Deputy Mayor Duncan who recommended leaving it in? Is that something that the councilwoman would have any appetite for? I mean, eventually, I see this, we could offshore jobs. I mean, honestly, you could open have the call center be in India, right, at some point?
I wasn't going that far, but
Yeah,
could.
but I mean, you could, if we open it this far, we could save a lot of money, right? It'd be terrible customer service, but we could save a lot of money, and I guess that's what concerns me if we get, because I totally understand what you're saying, and I hadn't thought of that, but I also think, boy, you open up that much.
I just look at who we've lost. You know, we had Councilman Dobler's amendment earlier. We lost a really good city engineer. This is in the overall policy, because he didn't want to get shouted out he'd always lived in rural, that's what was his family's choice, had been planning to go live on the family farm, and knew that he couldn't do it legitimately working for us, and we lost him. We still haven't replaced him. It's been a year. He was in Kansas. We apparently lost a prospective public works director recently, similarly. As much as we're wanting to hang on to people, and we're willing to pay people who work remotely from someplace else to live here, it just seemed like it was only fair.
Right.
And I didn't mean to really trade them off, they just
Right.
kind of both fit in that first line.
But if I could, I guess, go a little bit onto that, though, it benefits us when people live here, they pay taxes here, they, go to the store and buy groceries and stuff. And kind of the whole thing, I mean, the reason why you go out to western Kansas and the reason why these towns are dying are people slowly move away. Population is everything. Population is everything. And he's not here anymore, but, Mr. Ledbetter will talk about, we've lost populations, we've lost population. And you know what? He's right. I don't remember, I guess one of the candidates that we had for city manager spoke that the city he was at added, 1,000 people a year, I think. I remember a lot of us were like, wow. And I was up in Lincoln, Nebraska, kind of paid me to go to Nebraska and watch a football game, arch enemies, but anyway. In Lincoln, there's cranes everywhere. There's so much economic activity, and that city has went from, I think, maybe 120, my numbers are going to be way off here, but it was something like 120 to 180 in the last 10 years or 20 years. And I know this is just a small piece of that, but at some point, if we don't care where people live, then why do we try to get people to live here? So I don't know. So I guess let me come full circle and say, I would support this if you leave the bona fide residents of the state of Kansas. If not, I'm not supportive, so.
Okay, even though you can't vote, I'll say that I agree with Councilman Emerson.
You can vote on the amendments.
I know, but in the final end, I think we need to still keep our people here in Kansas as much as possible. Our population does need to grow, and understanding technology has made it possible for a lot of industries to move to a different format rather than being in place. I still hope and continue to bring attention to Topeka and what it offers, and bring them to Kansas and Topeka as residents. So I wouldn't support it unless you leave that piece in there.
I will, if I may check with my seconder, make a comment and do that. I guess one of the things that, I was on the committee that proposed this and went through this before. And with all the conversation that we had, and all the other things that we've done in the last 10, 15 years, you know, what I realized was the bottom line for me is I wanted people to want to live here.
Sure.
And that in fact, requiring that they live here gave a bad message. Particularly, I think the committee chair and the committee put forth that there's only 1 or 2 other cities in the state of Kansas that require residency at all. We had our heads down for 50 years around here. You know, if we don't make them live here, maybe they won't, or whatever that message was. And I'm proud of how far we've come and not having to make people do it. That said, I'll check with my seconder about splitting this motion. Do you think we should leave it, or?
I already suggested we could merge the two, so you can take that as, I'd be fine with putting the two together. That's your question.
Leaving the,
Your question is, would I be willing to support a change in your amendment to just keep the original language plus add your new language? Then yes, I would support.
Mike, check please, Mike.
Sorry. Thank you, ma'am. If your question is, would I be willing to support a change of your motion, of your amendment to the original language plus the new language, then yes, I would support that.
I'm willing to change that amendment. I regret it. But I really want the language that I'm proposing, that we are encouraging everybody to live in the city limits, being there. So I'm willing to change that. I appreciate the conversation.
Okay. Councilman Dover?
Could we have maybe the city attorney read now what that amendment says?
I believe the amendment says, all employees must be bona fide residents of the state of Kansas and are encouraged to live inside the city limits of the city of Topeka.
Okay. Further discussion, questions? Okay, we'll vote on the amendment. If you call the roll, please.
Okay. We have, council members Lesser,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
council members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
No.
Ortiz,
No.
Emerson,
Yes.
Kale,
Yes.
Nager,
No.
Dobler,
Yes.
and Duncan.
Yes.
So we have 7 yes, motion carries. Council members Valdivia Aquila, Ortiz, and Nager voted no.
Mayor,
Deputy Mayor?
don't throw things at me. I have an amendment. This one is really simple, I promise. I've talked with staff, and these are 2 positions we will never have any problems finding someone for. I would like to move that we add municipal judge to the list of positions that need to live within Shawnee County.
Isn't the judge a department head?
One of them is not. So, of the 2, we have 2 for reference, and one is considered department head, the other is not considered department head. But going to your point earlier, those folks do deal directly with people who live here, and they should probably live here. And again, everyone wants to be a judge, that's never an issue. Filling that spot.
So you offer that as an amendment?
Correct.
Okay.
Second. So where does it go?
I don't know, I didn't have a fancy printout in red like the rest of you. I apologize. Somewhere we have a list of positions.
It's right under, on line 18.
Line 18, maybe?
Yeah.
Yes, it would include municipal judges.
So department directors, municipal court judges,
No, just and.
and, yeah, sorry.
do better on the handouts next time.
Amanda's going to retype all of this.
Does he know about this?
He knows he'd have to live here anyway as department head, so it only impacts his individual.
We have a second?
We have a second from Councilman Kell. If you'll read it for clarification, just to make sure.
I believe it would be in B, so department director, semicolon, city manager. You probably should also change the heading, department director, semicolon, municipal court judges, semicolon, city manager. Department directors and municipal court judges must be bona fide residents of, oh, sorry, I don't have a mic on. Sorry. So department directors, semicolon, municipal court judges, semicolon, city manager. Department directors and municipal court judges must be bona fide residents of Shawnee County. The city manager must be a bona fide resident of the city of Topeka. Would be what B would read.
Any questions? Councilman Hiller?
I would just, since Judge Tadani is here, if this is a surprise to him, I'd like to make sure if he has any comments. If we could ask him for comment.
Okay.
Please don't drag me into this.
Thank you, but no thank you. Thank you, Your Honor, for keeping it simple. Okay. Okay. Further comments or questions? Okay. All right. If you will,
All right,
call the roll, please.
Mayor Padilla?
Yes.
Council members Hiller?
Yes?
Valdivia Akala?
No.
Ortiz? Emerson?
Yes.
Kale?
Yes.
Nager?
Yes.
Dobler?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
And Lesser.
Yes.
Okay, we have 8 yes, motion carries. Council members Valdivia Akala and Ortiz voted no.
Okay, I want to make sure here, Madam City Attorney, are we at the point now that we call for an approval of the ordinance, or?
If you're done with discussion, you could call the vote. If you have more discussion, you could keep talking.
Okay. Any other amendments? Oh, Tony?
Mayor, not an amendment, but a question actually for either the city attorney or HR. I guess notwithstanding this, if we have two candidates and one lives in the city, one lives in the county or elsewhere in the state, does the tie go to the city resident?
You could put it similar to veterans' preference as a city preference. Currently, if you didn't add something like that, it would be the discretion of the hiring manager, the philosophy of the city. If one's a better candidate, it should go to the better candidate qualified. If they're exactly even, it would be the discretion of whoever was hiring. You could add a city preference.
Would adding that need to be in an ordinance? Deputy Mayor?
I guess where not sure that would apply is, the way we've even changed it tonight is, we open the position, if you were talking about department heads, I assume you apply. We have candidates who will live or are living within the city. We've only said that exception can only be granted once we have no viable candidates that meet that criteria, at which point the HR director would have to say yes, city manager would have to say yes, and then you would open it up to those secondary candidates. So I'm not sure that situation, in theory, should never happen.
It's only for department heads, what you're talking about, though.
Correct, but everyone else, oh, you're talking about every other position?
Yes, yeah.
I would, okay, I got you, yeah.
Yeah.
So unless we put something in there, then.
Right, we've said that we encourage people to live inside the city limits, but yet, what are we gonna do to help them get hired? If it's,
I was just thinking of the scenario where someone says, yes, I'll move to your city, we hire them, and then they don't. I don't know that we have anything to force them then to, if we granted them something.
yeah, it's probably, it might not be workable, I just, and if there's another way to do that, maybe HR can just, maybe without it being in an ordinance, if you live in the city, you get preference.
If you wanted to make it an official city preference in A, you could add after encouraged to live inside the city of Topeka, when all other qualifications are considered,
preference will be given to a city resident if possible, and just add discretion. You could give me wordsmithing ability, I guess, to write that a little better, but if you were gonna do it, that's where I would do it, is in A. We could model it after the veterans preference language, similar to that, and add some wordsmithing.
I guess that would be then my amendment. Well, sorry, yeah, I did not, I was hoping there was just discretion already within HR to do that.
There is discretion in the fact that you all supervise the city manager. You can give direction to the city manager that when possible, you want them to hire city residents, and you could do discretion that way, too.
If that's cleaner, I'm fine with that. So, okay. And no amendment then, see,
Okay, but we had a hand go up. Councilwoman Hill.
sorry.
Well, I was thinking that
Sorry.
it's not binding, but by adding the new language that we did in A, it certainly says that it's a priority for us. So,
You mean by, yeah,
yeah.
I see what you're saying. Okay,
No amendment.
okay, you sure?
Yes.
I'm gonna give it a minute, just to make sure, so that you stew. Okay. So, now, we can entertain a motion.
We have a motion.
You already have a motion, you just need to call for a vote on it, as amended
As
by,
amended?
Dobler and Hiller, number 2, so yes.
I know what she's gonna ask, but go ahead and ask Councilwoman Ortiz. Councilwoman Ortiz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just, have a comment.
Okay.
I can't support this. I've always heard time after time after time after again how, you know, our employees need to live in the city. And I'm still hearing that. And, I don't believe that that's going to bring us more employees to the table. What's going to bring more employees to the table is for us to make sure that their salary is comparable to, is comparable to other cities. You know, we're losing police officers down the road to Kansas City. So that's my take on it, and if my memory serves me right, there's one council person's mother that agrees with me. I won't say who, but I hope she has a talk with her son if this passes. But I apologize, I appreciate you bringing this to the table, but I can't support it, not for those reasons. You know, people want to see the employees that we pay with their tax money, they want to see them live in the city of Topeka, and I can understand that. And I know times are changing, and I know we're doing a lot of networking at home, and that's been great for even some of our employees here. But I think to bring in more employees into the city, we're going to have to really look at where we are on hiring people and the salary wages. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay. Further comment?
I can tell Councilmember Ortiz I might have to do Thanksgiving at your house this year. I'll let you know.
Mr. Mayor, he's not welcome, not this year, not this past.
All are welcome. So, we're at a point now to move forward with the resolution as adopted and amended. Okay, if you'll call the roll, please.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
No.
Ortiz,
No.
Emerson,
Yes.
Kale,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
All right, we have 7 yes, Valdivia Aquila and Ortiz voting no, the motion carries.
I appreciate all the discussion and the comments, and it's important that we air this issue out so that citizens know that we've really given due consideration to all the variables that will be affected by this decision. So, again, I appreciate the governing body's input throughout the discussion. We'll move on now to item 4G, if the city clerk would read.
G is a resolution introduced by interim city manager William E. Cochran requesting the Board of Commissioners, Shawnee County, Kansas, to make the finding required by KSA 12520C to annex land not adjoining the city located on the east side of Southeast Croco Road, south of Southeast 37th Street.
Mr. City Manager.
Mayor and governing body, this is actually a request from a developer who would like their future development to be annexed by the city of Topeka. This is an island annexation. There's been prep work going on for about a year in constant communication with that developer, and we're to the point now where we are requesting the governing body to give us, to move this forward to Shawnee County for approval for annexation.
Questions for the city manager? Okay, I entertain a motion for approval. Motion to approve by Councilman Emerson, second by Deputy Mayor Duncan. You call the roll, please.
Council members Valdivia Aqua,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Kale,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Lesser, Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
and Councilmember Hiller.
Yes.
We have 10 yes, motion carries.
The motion being carried, we'll move on to item 4H, if the clerk would read.
H is an ordinance introduced by interim city manager William E. Cochran imposing a real estate lien pursuant to KSA 12808C upon certain lots and pieces of ground in Shawnee County, Kansas, to pay the cost for utility services where such payments to the city have not been made due to neglect, failure, or refusal to pay.
Okay, Mr. City Manager.
Mayor, governing body, this is the attempt to collect past due payments for utility services. This is an action item and requires 6 votes.
Okay. You've heard the reading. Is there a motion to approve? Councilman Kell?
What does it cost to do this process? Because I know sometimes I've seen governments chase their tail. In essence, they'll spend $300, collect $15. And I just want to know what we're looking at here, financial wise.
So every year we publish these, and so it's that normal process. I can get that cost figure for you. We do have her here. All right, yes, please, come forward.
I can try to answer that fairly quickly. Good evening. We have very minimal administrative time associated with it. Staff tracks the delinquent amounts. We send it over to the county. The county then assesses it to property tax, and at that point, it's out of our hands. I don't have a number to put to it, but it is minimal administrative time.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. So what this is this is going to be attached to the tax rolls?
That is correct. It'll be an assessment on the tax bill that comes out in November.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Thank you very much. Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
Not yet.
A motion to approve by Councilman Emerson, a second by Councilman Dobler. If you'll call the vote, please.
Okay, council members Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Kale,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan, Lesser,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
council members Hiller,
Yes.
and Valdivia Aqua.
Yes.
We have 9 yes, motion carries.
Okay. Motion's carried. We'll move on to action item 4I. Discussion and possible action. If the city clerk would read.
I is approval of amendment number 1 to contract number 48905, which is the current labor agreement covering 2020 to 2023 between the City of Topeka and employees of the Water Pollution Control Division as represented by the United Workers of Environmental Trades of Topeka.
City Manager.
Mayor, governing body, this is a request to approve the contract that has been presented to the governing body and has been discussed.
Okay. Are there any questions for the City Manager? None? Okay. What is the will of the body? And move approval from Councilman Dobler and a second from Councilman Emerson. If you call the vote, please.
Council members Emerson,
Yes.
Kale,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Lesser,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
Council members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Akala,
Yes.
and Ortiz.
Yes.
We have 10 yes, motion carries.
Mayor,
Yes.
also I'd like to thank Rick Wilson and Andy Sample from the union who worked with our negotiating team to get this contract worked out. So thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate your work. Stand up. We'll give you a round of applause for your efforts.
And just so you know, you guys are critical response. Not experiential knowledge. Actually, they do need experiential knowledge. And they have it.
Okay, on the agenda, we'll now move on to non-action items. And
We got Jay.
Got Jay, stop.
where? What?
Jay.
Okay.
J is discussion with possible action regarding the townsite parking garage.
Okay. Okay. Mr. City Manager.
Mayor, governing body, this topic is on for discussion or action. We would like to have action on this in the aspects. If you remember several months back, Councilman Lesser asked to break out the Townsite Plaza parking garage from conversation of the parking conversation. We're at the point where we need to kind of get guidance and how to proceed. And what we're looking for is to put it back into the overall conversation or continue to work on it by itself. And with that conversation, the Public Works Infrastructure Committee several months back did approve a little over $1 million to address issues within the Townsite Plaza. Those dollars were basically put on hold because this conversation being broke out. So tonight, the request or guidance and/or action that we are seeking is that either we put the Townsite parking garage back into conversation and we move forward with doing those repairs, or we continue to keep it broke out and we'll then seek other avenues on that. We do have staff available to answer any type of questions that the governing body may have.
Okay. Questions for the City Manager or staff? Councilwoman Hiller.
Just one really, if you could refresh us, you're talking about $1.2 million. Where is that money already in an approved budget and just being held in abeyance? Or are we talking about finding new money from somewhere else?
So Councilwoman, this was approved as part of the capital improvement process earlier this year. Because we have actually missed our cycle for bonding, what we would do is we would pull $1.2 million out of the parking fund reserves. On the next cycle, we would then bond it and then reimburse the fund.
Okay, so this is a matter of simply coming back and moving forward with something we had already budgeted. It's not new money.
No, ma'am, it's not.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Deputy Mayor.
I guess I need some clarification from what specifically staff's recommendation is to us, because at one point, it was suggested to us that selling it was our best option. We were then given a presentation that said, if we do that, we could also lose money. So to be honest, as I sit here, I know you want some guidance, but I mean, I have no idea what staff's recommendation is to us as to what they'd like to do with this garage.
City Manager and then Councilman Emerson?
Staff's recommendations would be to keep the Townsite Plaza in the inventory of the city of Topeka, and the recommendation would be to invest the dollars in to get it up to speed.
Okay, thank you, that helps at least. We get to a decision.
I guess, Mayor, I see on our agenda packet, we have a beautiful PowerPoint, and I guess I wonder if that might be a good thing for staff to go through. It's beautiful, beautiful PowerPoint, yes.
And short, too.
Yeah. It's only like 38, 39 slides. No, it's like 4 or 5.
With video.
With video, yes.
Okay, who's presenting?
So there's only a few slides if you just click through as we go through. So it was requested that we provide some basic information about the garage. Some of this has been presented before, but just so everyone's on the same page, we know we're talking about the same asset. This is the Townsite garage. The garage that sits roughly at 6th and Madison is located underneath the Townsite Plaza. There's approximately 817 spaces, 250,000 square feet. It was built in 1972. We are proposing, and what was proposed in the budget was repair totals of $1,170,000. You've seen a lot of different numbers regarding the garage. The number that was presented at some of our special meetings and at some previous was a total number that was given for 10 years worth of maintenance. Those numbers were adjusted up for inflation. What we're discussing tonight primarily is what was already approved in the budget, which I'll show on the next slide. And then just for reference, we have the pre-COVID revenue of the garage to understand how this fits into the overall revenue of our parking system. So prior to the interruption in service that we had due to COVID in 2020, for the 3 years prior to 2020, we averaged $675,000 roughly in revenue. That number has dropped, but we are forecasting for this year to be roughly around $620,000 based on revenue year to date, which would be very close to in line with what we budgeted. And we hope as more people return to work and the occupancy of the building above the garage returns to more full occupancy after the renovations, that we could see further increases in revenue as well. So just to give you some details, oh, I went one too far. There we go. Oh, it looks like we both did it at the same time. Just showing you what these repair priorities were. The total amount there that you see at the bottom is $1,171,000. That includes what we consider to be the most urgent needs for repair. There were additional recommendations that were made and additional maintenance requirements that were built into the number for the 10-year basis. But these are the issues that we felt are most in need of repair currently that we would like to move forward on. These were suggested to us based on an engineering study that was done in 2020 and includes the things that are likely to cause any potential safety issues or any potential issues that could cause further damage to the structure that we would want to address immediately. And then it was also requested, our legal department provide the current rules regarding the sale or potential continued ownership of that garage, and if there's any provisions regarding its sale, which are listed here. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions on this item? Councilman Lesser and then Councilman Dobler.
I was just going to make a motion.
Okay, Councilman Dobler?
Yeah, just a quick question, maybe for Jason on the revenue. You're anticipating 618,000 year-to-date revenue. Is that through the end of August?
It's through the end of July.
Okay.
So we're anticipating that our total revenue year-to-date is about 55% of what we'll collect for the year.
Okay. Thank you. One more.
Councilman?
So do we? Thank you. Sylvia was a little slow there. Yeah.
Mic check, mic check.
There we go. Now I feel better. Is this an either-or thing? I mean, if we choose to fund these repairs, which we obviously need, we can still look at whether we retain this garage long-term, correct?
Yeah, we can make the investment into the repairs and then still look at what the disposition of that garage would be. But this request, like, we're at the point where I think we kind of need to make a decision on moving forward, but yes, that option to sell it or whatever would still be there. And I would anticipate if we make these investments, that the price of that garage would then go up for resale value, or sell
Okay.
value.
So staff is recommending that we make the repairs.
That garage needs some immediate repairs, and the recommendation would be yes to make the repairs.
Okay. They're not recommending that we retain the garage.
The overall feeling is that, from staff, is that the garage would remain in the inventory, but that would be, for the council to make that decision in the future when we have that discussion of what we're going to do with the parking garage. As you know, we do have a individual who's interested in the parking garage and has a right of first refusal, so that conversation still needs to be had.
So one more question, Mayor.
Yes.
Perhaps for the city attorney. If somebody makes a motion to approve this expenditure, that doesn't do anything long-term to our ability to sell the garage, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Very good, thank you, Mayor.
I suppose actually there's a caveat to that. Depends on how you paid for it in bonding, potentially. If you bonded it and it
plot
depends
thick.
on how long you do it, it will limit you. So I take back what I said. Yes, it does limit your ability potentially to sell it. You could pay off your bonds early and sell it if you wanted to, though. Except Steve's shaking his head, so no, you can't do that with how we bond it. So.
I'm going to second the motion.
It's made it yet.
Yes, he did.
Okay. I'm sorry, I apologize. Councilman, I didn't hear your motion.
He's kidding.
Okay. All right. All right. Councilman Lesser.
I would like to make a motion to direct the city manager to work with the city attorney to list the parking garage for sale by sealed bids with a minimum bid of $1.5 million.
Okay. In as is condition, is that?
As is condition.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion? Okay. We have a second under discussion. Councilman Kell.
My issue with selling it is that that building's kind of taking a revival right now, and so occupancy will be going up. And my fear is you bring in someone that charges whatever they want to charge, could drive that building vacant again, and then we're stuck with a large building in downtown that no one wants to occupy because the parking rates for the closest parking is unreasonable. I think this is a good way where we can help revive the building by keeping control of that parking garage and also control the rates, so then that way it promotes occupancy.
Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess my question is, since the owner has the right of first refusal, I don't know how we would bid it out, take sealed bids, because then they could just come in and match whatever. So I'm thinking there could be some games played where they didn't bid on it and just waited and see what the, I don't know. It's kind of a hybrid thing. It's not, the high bid gets it. I guess I don't know how this would work.
Well,
Councilman Lesser.
I think regardless, it really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, Councilman Kell, the owner of Townsite Plaza is the one who has the right of first refusal on the garage. So there's not going to be any type of motivation for him to raise the prices on that to push the occupancy down of his own building.
That's if he gets a bid, convince it though.
He has a right of first refusal.
You can still refuse it.
Mayor.
Order, please.
My point then to that, Councilman, was at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether it's sealed or whether it's not sealed. At the end of the day, the individual's still going to have the first right of first refusal. So that, you know, if he's not the high bidder and somebody else is, then I see the best interest of the city handling it that way versus you know, it's a silent bid type, sealed bid situation, no different than you bid. You know,
My competitor just doesn't have the opportunity to come in and change their bid, you know, or match my bid.
No, yeah, and I think you make a valid point, but at the end of the day, he's going to, whether it's sealed, whether it's not sealed, whether it's, I see the city's best interest to get the best price is going about it this way versus negotiating against yourself with one party.
City manager?
So on the right of first refusal, we would, if that would be the direction, we would enter a conversation with the person that has the right of first refusal to try to negotiate a fair market price. And if that fair market price is not agreed upon, then we would move into the bid process.
With not having any repairs being done.
Right, the understanding is, this is as is, we'd enter into conversation with that individual who has the right of first refusal to try to discuss a fair market value. My understanding is a minimum of 1.5 million, and so that's where we'd start.
Councilman Dover and then Councilwoman Hiller.
Quick question, probably for the city attorney. If we enter into a bid situation, do we have to take the highest bid, or are we required to sell the garage once we enter that?
I'd have to do some research on specifically garages because the rules, I think, can get a little weird on bids. But generally, it depends on how you've structured your bids, if you have to take highest bid or not. I think you could also argue that you could do a sealed bid system to establish fair market value, and then say, we think this is the fair market value, and see if the person with first right of refusal will match the highest bid, because if it's a sealed bid system, in theory, he could say no, and then it could go through the appraisal process that the contract determines. But that could be one way to establish what your fair market bid is, or value is.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Well, I want to interject here, I guess. We've gotten this far, and I've been really proud of the difficult conversations that we've had and the work that the Public Works Infrastructure Committee has done, as well as the staff. But one of the things we've talked about more than once is the fact that this is a system. We have a system that includes the garages and the on-street parking, and for us to provide what we've got moving now and to provide what our city needs and to maintain the prices as much as we can, we need to control that system. We've seen the maps that show the layout, the envy of any city in terms of the spacing of the garages that we have and the capacity. The staff's evaluation on town site is that it's one of the ones that would generate money for us. We need that in this system to manage the pricing overall. We also need to control the garages, at least for, we haven't calendared it out exactly, but the staff has advised us that we need to plan the entire system, but that we're going to have to change out the garages one at a time, and we need to control being able to move people around the leased spaces and the daily spaces during the course of that transition as well. I think it's premature to vote on selling any garages. I appreciate the staff's recommendation that we keep it. I would like, out of this evening, because I know we're going to talk about Uptowner next, to see if the staff can give us a time frame for bringing that whole parking package back. The downtown merchants are working on it, and residents and owners are working on the on-street parking issues, as well as better utilizing the garages and how to manage us moving into the full engagement part of downtown. I think they need to be given the chance to make sure that we've got a whole package that will work before we change any of it. So I would not support the sale, especially not at this time. But I will support the 1.2 million, activating the $1.2 million and getting it fixed. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? Deputy Mayor?
I've said before, and members of this body, I'm not opposed to looking at selling some of these garages. I have to be honest, I was not prepared to have that discussion this evening. And there's been some questions raised that I still want answers for, that I think would help me walk through this process. So if this is the motion, which is fine, I'm going to vote no, not because I'm outright opposed to it, but I just haven't wrapped my head around what that would look like yet and gotten some information that I need. So thank you, Mayor.
Further discussion? Okay, you have a motion. Did we get a second from Councilman Dobler? Okay. So we vote on the motion as proposed by Councilman Lesser. If you call the vote, please.
Councilmembers Kell,
No.
Nager,
No.
Yes.
Dobler, Duncan,
No?
Lesser,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
No.
Councilmembers Hiller,
No.
Valdivia Akala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
No.
and Emerson.
Sorry, bro, but no.
All right, we have 7 no, the motion fails with Councilmembers Dobler, Lesser, and Valdivia Akala voting yes.
Okay. So, Councilman Emerson?
Thank you, Mayor. And I think like Deputy Mayor Duncan, I too am not opposed to exploring that. Kind of the same way I wasn't prepared to, I need to think about that a little bit. I was wondering, though, staff could tell me, are some of these repairs like things that need to be done like next 30 days, next 60 days, or we're going to have structural problems, or?
I would say there's nothing that would fall into that next 30 days category. However, the longer we wait, the more we are not satisfying our customers.
Councilman Dover and Councilman Lesser? No, did you have follow-up?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So I guess my question there, if we do look to sell this, I think any upgrades we do to make this better for customers, I think would just help, right? I would hope. So are there particular things on here?
One of the major ones that we're hearing from it is the lighting condition, and on that, it's not just replacing bulbs, the baluses and stuff like that got to be replaced. So, yeah, those would probably be improvements that would benefit if we go to sell.
Thank you.
Councilman Dover?
Thank you, Mayor. I think we heard just a little bit earlier that if we do the improvements and we bond with revenue bonds, that we cannot sell the garage. Is that correct?
Steve's looking like he wants to weigh in.
Steve?
Councilman, we get into a situation to where if we have bonded, it makes it very difficult to sell them.
So I think what we ought to look at, I'm not sure how to word this, but do we have the funds available in the parking reserves to take care of all our part of this?
Yes, sir. For the $1.2 million, we would pull it out of parking reserves.
Okay. I could probably support that. I certainly won't support selling revenue bonds until we know whether we're going to sell the garage or not. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Lesser?
I want to make sure that I heard correctly. You said there was no immediate repairs that were needed within the next 30 days?
I would not categorize anything as needed within the next 30 days. There is nothing that we have been told is an imminent threat to safety or anything like that. As to the necessity of the repairs, that's up to your discretion as to what is important.
Thank you. City Manager, was it 62 lights? How many lights was it?
It was a large number, I don't remember.
361.
306, nah, there wasn't three, one.
I think there were 70-some that were out or not operational when we received that email.
So you don't call 60-plus lights immediate?
I would consider the lights that are out in the garage to be a serious concern, yes. We make every effort to replace the bulbs as they expire. Unfortunately, the type of light fixture that is in the garage right now is a bulb that is very hard to procure. We can typically get about 25 bulbs once a month as they come available. As we've tried to use other bulbs that are not meant for those fixtures, they either burn out very quickly or are dimmer than we would like them to be because they are not built for that particular fixture. So that is one area where we would like to make those repairs. And as I've said, we try to accommodate as best we can with the equipment we currently have. So it is a concern, yes.
So what I'm hearing is two things. I'm hearing you tell me why it's difficult to replace the lights, but I also am hearing you now telling me that it's not a concern that we have 60-plus lights at, that it's not an immediate concern.
It is definitely an immediate concern that we are trying to address with the resources we have and are not able to keep up. That's correct, yes.
The other thing, Mr. Mayor, that I'd like to point out too is if you could, on the PowerPoint at my screen with, I think we also are though showing what, another $5 million in a 10-year deferred maintenance, which would have to be bonded as well, correct? So we're not looking at 1.2 million, we're looking at projection 6.7 million.
That includes
What's that?
It includes those repairs?
Correct. 1.17.
5.6.
5.6. Thank you.
I have a question too, kind of to follow up. What I'm hearing is you could support 1.2 million to get repairs done. And we can do that using reserve funds and not bond that. At that point, then we would consider whether or not we would retain it in our inventory, and then if we were going to continue to retain it and make the additional repairs, then that money would be a bonded effort. But if we decided at that point, after those initial repairs were done, we could sell it at that point with those repairs done. Is that my correct understanding? Okay. And I have a little bit of concern as well that we've been hearing about these problems about the lights and other things for some time. And we're hearing them from people who pay money to use that garage. And I think it's an obligation for us to repair those things to make it safe and do it as soon as possible. And that 1.2 million will allow us to do that. I think I'm not talking about enhancing the value, which it will. I'm talking about taking care of the people who rent that space and making sure we don't put them in an unsafe condition. And whatever it takes to get those lights, if maybe we don't replace them with the same ones, we get different kinds, and that's what you use that 1.2 million, is to change them out and get something more efficient and long-lasting, because it's going to stay there for whether or not we keep that building in our inventory or not. I just don't like putting off repairs that I think, in my opinion, and not with the experience that you may have, are important safety conditions and concerns for the people who rent there. So I'm supportive of the 1.2 to get the repairs done and get it into a condition where then we can reevaluate whether or not we're going to keep it or not, and then go into a bonded issue. So at least those are my comments. Councilman Lesser and then Councilman Dobler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quite frankly, I had no aspirations that my motion was going to pass. That being the case, the point was bringing this thing front and center where
we're either going to do one of these two things. We're either going to sell this or we're going to fix it, okay? One of the two things. We've gone from, in the span of 90 seconds to where there's nothing that needs to be done in the 30 days to, yeah, we do have an issue of lighting in the garage, and it is immediately and does need to be get done. And that's where we're at here, is the calls from the owner, the tenant, the repeated, calls of the lighting, we're going to go one way or the other, and that's what my point was at this point in time. And I fully support, the 1.2 out of the reserves to get it done, but I want to get moving on it. How long have we been working on this even? It's been 180 days. It's time to get it going.
Agreed. Thank you, sir. Councilman Dobler.
Thank you, Mayor. City Manager, we had some time back an RF something or other for selling the garage. We had an RF something or other for managing the garages. Where are we at? When are we going to bring this all to a head?
Yep, so the RFP for third-party management closed on the 31st of August. We're compiling that information. We'll have that hopefully together 2 weeks, be able to present something reasonable. So then we'll have the RFP for selling, we'll have the RFP for managing, and then we'll have our own RFP to run our own parking system. So we'll have all of that available for discussion in the near future.
Okay, I think it'll be a great time to really discuss the overall issue. And, I'm looking forward to that. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilwoman Hiller and Councilman Emerson.
Two questions for staff. One, when is the next time we would be issuing bonds?
Next August, September.
Next August, so we've got more time than I'd really like to allow. We got 10 months to get this figured out. Next question would be, with the two RFPs about purchase, sales, and management, and then the work that we need to do with the downtown folks on street parking a little further, how soon could we have the whole plan back with one or more final proposals?
Councilwoman, that's a bit of a loaded question, to be honest.
Sorry, I didn't mean to be.
Given the number of RFPs that are currently out, the parking one for management services will close tomorrow, and we'll be able to consolidate the results so that we can understand what a privatization of our parking system would entail for the garages. But without further guidance as a policy from this governing body as to how we build out those scenarios, whether it's a mixed own operated, if some of it's managed, those are elements that we'll need guidance on to be able to come back with a proposal as to, what that system looks like and how we can move forward.
If you can't answer this question, okay, but assuming then that there might be some stages of conversation with us, how long would it take reasonably, knowing that these pieces are moving, for us to perhaps bring it to a closure and have a final parking plan? Is that still too far out?
So we are looking at the dates to bring back, likely in October, the proposals to you for management. Depending upon the guidance from this governing body, we can incorporate that in. We did present in July the financials based on selling different assets, so we can also recap that and bring it as part of the proposal when we do bring that back. But it's going to be a very long presentation with a lot of different options and a lot of different numbers, which is part of my hesitation for a full discussion that will be productive within this.
I wasn't meaning to push you too fast. I was thinking 6 months, if we could maybe get this done by March. The third thing I wanted was to compliment the committee. I did read your minutes, and it hasn't been discussed really tonight, but the committee went out of its way to ask the staff whether the $1.2 million in repairs, whether there's anything that's proposed in this list that would have to be redone when the other part of the $5.6 million was done, and the assurance was no, that everything that we would be doing with this money should stay. Did I read that correctly?
Do the garage, yeah.
That discussion was about a different garage, but I can confirm that that would apply to this garage. So these recommendations are made based on our engineering report in a sequence that they recommended that would allow us to make the repairs in a sequence that makes sense and not have to go over the same area multiple times.
Thank you. With that, I would move to approve the 1.2 million, 1.17? 1.171 million.
Okay, second from,
What?
is there further
Point of order.
discussion?
What is in front of us is different than what we have been discussing. In other words, what was put in front of us was a motion that includes bonding. We have had a discussion about just taking it from reserves. So I want to make sure our motion is exactly what we want it to be, whether it's bonding or reserves, but just want to point of order that one out there before we move forward. Thank you.
Motion would be to take 1.171 million from reserves and move forward.
1.2.
Oh, make it 1.2.
The 1.7 is a fairly old estimate.
Okay.
So we are expecting that those numbers are higher than what is on that sheet.
Okay. 1.2 million from parking reserves for the town site garage.
Yes,
Repairs
ma'am.
as listed.
And I still second.
A motion and a second. Further discussion before we call the vote? Did Sylvia leave us? I want to make sure that I don't leave her out.
She's almost there.
She came.
She's parking her car in the garage. Okay.
You ready?
Okay.
So the motion is 1.2 from parking reserves to do immediate repairs
As listed.
as listed.
Councilman Dover. Go ahead if you have a thought. Well, my thought was, and I think it kind of goes to what Councilwoman Hilder was saying. I don't just want to approve the money and say we're going to do it. I'd like to see some timelines and so that we get some things done and it doesn't just sit there, that some.
Definitely, we'll put a timeline together and what is going to be addressed, and we'll get that all done.
Okay.
Do you need me to say as soon as possible?
By when? That's what I was going to say.
I don't mind adding that to the motion.
As soon as practical.
Okay. Better, whatever.
Councilman Dover.
Could I do a friendly amendment, which would just add the language that says this project will not be revenue bonded without express approval of the council?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. Still second that?
Still second that.
Brenda?
Yeah.
If you've kept up with us, if you'll reread the motion.
Okay, so motion by Hiller, second by Emerson. They're going to move to approve $1.2 million from the parking reserves for repairs to the Townset garage as listed. They wanted to include a timeline of the overall parking system as soon as possible or as soon as practical. And then Dobler's friendly amendment was to make sure that it is not bonded without express approval of the governing body.
Timelines for the garage, right?
I think the amendment was, I don't mind what you said, but I think the amendment was to do the repairs as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The timeline would be for the repairs, not the system itself.
Okay. Got it.
Okay,
Okay. Any further questions? If none, you'll call the vote, please.
all right. Council members Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Lesser,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
Council members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
and Kell.
Yes.
We have 10 yes, motion carries.
Some time, okay. Before we move on to the non-action items, let's take a break for about,
Mr. Ledbetter signed up to speak.
okay,
For the next
hang
one,
in
sorry.
there.
Here's the next one. Next one.
That's for 5A, though.
She got ahead of you.
I did.
Okay, all right. I
They all look the same.
thought I read it right. Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we'll reconvene at 8:29. Okay, we're back in session after a short recess. We'll continue with the agenda, and we're now at agenda number 5, non-action items, 5A. Madam Clerk.
A is discussion regarding repairs to the Uptowner parking garage.
Well, we can go both ways here. City Manager, if you have some comment, or Deputy Mayor Duncan to report. That's what I have on here.
That'd be the wrong committee.
I don't know nothing.
Yeah.
So Mayor and everybody, what we have here is a topic for discussion on the Uptowner parking garage. Public Works Infrastructure Committee recommended this conversation be moved to the governing body with a 3-0 vote. The recommendation is to spend $600,000 from cash reserves to fix immediate life safety issues within that parking garage, which then would allow us to keep it open. Next week, we will have presentation from Bartlett West on the structure itself and what the process of fixing it would look like up and beyond that $600,000. The $600,000 in upgrades would also fall under that category. The Councilwoman Hiller asked that it not be, or that it wouldn't have to be replaced. You could do it, and that would be part of the overall parking garage repairs for the future. But this immediate conversation is basically $600,000, up to $600,000 to remediate the life safety issues, and then keep the garage open, and then have further conversation after next week's presentation as to what the overall plan would be for the garage.
Okay, before we move into discussion, we do have somebody signed up for public comment on this, Mr. Joseph Ledbetter.
Thank you, Mayor, governing body. I'm not taking a position on these repairs. I've seen pictures of this garage. The lights look like they haven't been replaced in 66 years. That's how old this garage is. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's working and what isn't inside the garage. But what I do have a concern about is not about the repairs per se, so much as, unlike Townsite, you don't have access to the rent roll, to the income off this property. I think you're getting $850 a month, which is some kind of admin fee. That pays about 1/3 of the insurance premium. So the city's footing the bill for that. If you put this money into the maintenance of this building, would it not be reasonable to send the owner or negotiate with the owner that by a date certain we start getting the rents? Or he could collect and maybe take 20% and send it to you, within a 30-day period of time, something structured by the legal department. But I guess what makes me a little concerned about this, I know there is at least one developer that would be happy to probably buy between 3 and 4 of your parking garages that are owned fee simple. Even if you privatize maintenance, and again, you don't have control of this garage through the rent roll. You do not get the rent directly off this garage. So you put this money in, what is the incentive to go ahead and get this sold? Or is it going to be next year we're going to put more money in and we still don't have control of the management of this facility? We can't sell it, or you could sell it. I don't know what the agreement is now, the length of it, with the present manager. And I know private developers would be more than happy to work with whoever that is that owns those consortium of office buildings down there. They're not trying to run the tenants out, but they would like to buy the buildings, that building and others, potentially. One of the things you do not solve with private management is you still have the problem of the maintenance cost. And it could be, on 4 garages, you might be looking at $15, $20 million. That's going to have to be bonded at these high rates of bonds that we have now. We're going to go further in debt. If you do revenue bonds, you'll never be able to sell them because that revenue is going to be tied to that asset, which will preclude you from being able to sell it. You have a lot of empty parking spots on the street that you could be renting, but we've got to worry about these parking garages that need all this maintenance. At least the surface parking doesn't have to have a lot of maintenance, at least from what I can see. So I think there's a way to creatively work with private developers and also, do necessary repairs if they're really needed. But with this particular garage, again, you don't have control of the rent roll. So you're putting the money in and you're going, okay, life safety, I understand that, but where does the line, where do you stop? You're going to do 600,000 potentially tonight. What about next year? Until you make a decision about this garage, I'm just raising these questions, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, discussion? Councilman Emerson?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Mr. Ledbetter brought up some great points, but I believe, City Manager, could you elaborate on that? I believe our agreement with that person has expired now, correct?
Yeah, so we are operating on basically a gentleman's agreement, shall we say. The actual contract is expired, and the reason for that is that this conversation has taken place. And so the anticipation is that if we make the investments into the garage, that we will retain ownership of the garage, and then we'll enter into conversation with that individual as to what it will look like leading up to the overall repairs of the garage, rehabbing of the garage. But at the end of the day, once everything is done, completed, whatever the investment is into that facility, the city of Topeka will retain ownership, and then those individuals that are, that is currently manage it, we would be having conversation with that individual as well as all the people that are renting through him, and they would be renting spaces from the city of Topeka as opposed to renting from him.
And if, thank you, Mayor. And at market rate, correct? Not?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And the city staff has those amounts and all that, and so all that will be conversation piece.
Is that something they could provide us this week? If we would table action on this for a week, is that something we could get, like what those rent and what your projection for future revenue would be?
Yeah, tonight is discussion, but you do have the revenue rates, right?
The current market rate would be established similar to our other garages at the $67.75. And we did include some projections with the July deck, but that did assume a rate increase. But we have the models that would show what we would anticipate in revenue with $67.75. We can provide that next week.
Okay. Prior to next week?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It has never started.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Deputy Mayor.
Just for clarification, will the presentation from Bartlett and West next week be at the start of the meeting before we take up this item, or as a non-action item after we've discussed the item?
It is at the very beginning,
Okay.
so you get to hear all that information before making an educated decision.
Perfect, that's all I need to know. Thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm a little confused because notice was given to have that garage vacated, as I understood it, some months ago now, because it was too dangerous, on the basis that it was too dangerous to have, in part, A, the contract was expiring, but B, that it was alleged that the circumstances were so bad there shouldn't be any cars in there at all. So if you could react to that, but also would this proposed 600,000 get us to the point where we could actively take over management of it and in good faith lease out those spaces at the market rate?
Yeah, so the items that were listed as life safety issues were those that it was advised that it be vacated. That individual did receive a notice, but timelines and stuff like that, they did not believe it could be met. So we had conversation about extensions. There were an extension that was given, and so now, and that went through the end of August. And so we're at the point now where they have basically a 2-week window to vacate because these conversations are taking place. Once a decision is made next week as to what is going to be, if, you know, the dollars are not approved, then we will vacate it and we'll have an empty structure sitting there until the governing body decides what they're going to do with the property. If the dollars are allocated next week, then we will start working on the life safety issues, be able to keep the garage open, and then the presentation, hopefully next week, from the structural engineer will say how it can remain open and be operational as repairs, the more in-depth repairs take place. But at some point, it will have to be closed to do the finalization of the rehab of the parking garage.
So when do we start collecting the rent?
Well, that conversation will start after the next week when we figure out what we're going to do with it.
Okay.
Further discussion, questions? City Manager? Councilwoman Ortiz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. City Manager, didn't Mr. Parrish ask to wait until December, the end of December?
There was a request from the current manager that, yes, it go through the end of the year, but we do have issues that have to be addressed. So that conversation, that was not granted. It was given through the end of August. And like I said, we're kind of in a holding pattern for the next 2 weeks till we figure out the conversation next week.
So there's no way we can ground that due to safety, is what you're telling me?
I'm sorry, I didn't, what was that?
There's no way we can grant that due to safety, is what you're telling me?
Well, the governing body, we can make that exception if that's the direction that we want to go. The anticipation is if we approve to do the life safety issues, that we're going to continue to let it be operational and make those repairs as soon as we can.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Dobler?
I mean, I think there's a little bit bigger discussion here, so, and we covered this in the committee. In order to fully rehab that garage, it's going to cost $5 million, something north of $5 million bucks. If we choose to close it down, we're going to have to demolish it. Demolition costs for about $2.5 million. So the real question is, for another $2.5 million, do we want to rehab that garage, own it? We know there's parking needed in that area. There's lots of office buildings, there's potential of future development down there, whatever it is, we know the need for parking is there. We have to make a simple decision, and really, part of the issue is why would we approve $600,000 if we weren't ultimately, and I know we can't make all those decisions, but that's leading us to the next decision, which is to spend $5 million. To me, that makes a lot of sense because, you know, if we're going to have to tear it down anyways, and that's going to be very expensive, at some point we, as a city, somebody has to provide parking there for the office buildings, for future development, for all of those good things. So But I think we've kind of overlooked that in this discussion, that there is a bigger discussion down the road. Right now, it's just, can we take care of some of the life safety issues? Can we get it to the point that we can start rehabbing the garage? And perhaps keep it open during a period of that rehab time. Thank you, Mayor.
A question I would ask too is, as the councilman points out, rehabbing versus demolishing. And if we demolish it and there's still a need, either a developer or somebody would see the need to build a new garage in today's cost, what would it cost us to build a new garage, or them?
Yeah, a new garage of that stature would probably be about $20 million. And so I really doubt that we would have a developer that would want to make that type of investment for a parking garage.
Councilman Kell.
For an investment that hefty, $5 million, I really want to make sure we're having the contract worded just right, because if I remember right, the person that was managing it said they put all this maintenance money into it, and it's just kind of just mainly this fire system and elevator system, and nothing structural. So we got to make sure that, if we're going to rehab something for someone to manage, that we're making sure that they're taking care of what the property is, and we're not doing this again in 5 years with neglect, in essence. So I definitely want to make sure if we were to manage it back out, we have a very firm contract that says certain things have to be done to make sure we're not doing this again in 5 years.
Yes, sir. The anticipation is that at the end of next week, we will retain ownership of the garage, and we will be doing that as we go forward. That's the anticipation. I think Councilman Dobler points out, there's no need to make that type of investment if we're not going to manage it. And so this is one that does, I believe, very strongly plays into the future of downtown Topeka in that area. And so it makes sense for us to do the life safety issues, take control of the garage, and then enter into conversation with the current manager and working out space with his current tenants.
I do think that its location is pretty strategic as we continue to develop downtown activities and the possibility of even increasing more residency in the downtown area, because that has seemed to have a lot of appeal right now. So I think protecting that investment, but being very, very deliberate in what gets done and making sure it gets done again on deadlines without the delays that I think has brought us to where we are today is important as we move forward. But it's just for discussion for this evening, but something to give a lot of thought to.
Yeah, I believe the presentation at the beginning of next week will be very enlightening and shed a lot of light as to the potential of this garage.
Okay. Further discussion on this item? Questions for city manager? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next non-action item, 5B. If the clerk would read.
Discussion concerning the adoption of the 38th edition of the Uniform Public Offense Code and local amendments amending Topeka Municipal Code Section 905080.
City manager?
Mayor, governing body, this is the UPOC offense code that for adoption. We have the city attorney present to answer any questions or provide any information that she feels is necessary.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Today, you are looking at an adoption of the newest update to the Uniform Public Offense Code. This is published by the League of Municipalities annually. It helps codify any changes in the criminal statutes. Next, you'll be asked about the standard traffic ordinance, which deals with traffic offenses. There were not significant changes this year. You are provided a memo that goes through each of those changes and what the changes were. There is one issue I'd like to draw your attention to. Legal staff this year has specifically chosen not to remove UPOC provision 11.15, permitting a dangerous animal to be at large. We feel this provision works with our dangerous dog ordinance, and they can both coexist. We've also heard of issues with other kinds of dangerous animals that are not dogs, so this gives additional ability to deal with some of those. You will be seeing, or at least one of your committees later this year will be seeing an ordinance that we're working on that's more comprehensive to address dangerous animals in general, to put the provisions between dogs and cats and leopards and tigers and whatever else wants to escape all in the same provisions. So we're working on a more comprehensive ordinance on that, but in the meantime, we feel like 11.15 helps fill a gap that we need. The rest of the ordinance and changes are pretty standard, and we carry over our exemptions from last year dealing with smoking and some of those things that we need local amendments to. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on 5B? I guess we could take care of 5C at the same time.
5C, the city attorney does have some things that she would like to draw your attention to. They are, I think, impactful for us, so.
Okay, so moving on to the standard traffic ordinance. This is similar to the Uniform Public Offense Code. It's published by the league every year and adopts changes to the standard traffic code. There is one significant change that the legislature made this year that I'd like to call your attention to. That's number 3 in the memo, driving under the influence of intoxicating liquor or drug penalties. This year, the legislature removed the minimum requirement for imprisonment for your first conviction of DUI, so people that have their first DUI will no longer serve mandatory jail time. I draw your attention to that one because that's a significant change, but two, also because our prosecution staff has raised some concerns with some equity that while you can't fix those issues, perhaps that the legislature, if you have the opportunity, you would be willing to consider supporting changes. Currently, if you are driving on a suspended license for the second time, which is a very common offense, you got a traffic ticket at 18, you didn't realize you got your license suspended, something happens when you're 40, you don't realize it, you get your license suspended again. That is a mandatory 5-day imprisonment that we cannot waive. So you get 5 days for driving on a suspended license for the second time and no jail time for a DUI. So our prosecution staff tends to have a real equity issue with that. If the opportunity ever came around where you could support changing that, our prosecution staff would appreciate that. The rest of the changes deal with technical issues, displaying of license plates, e-bikes, changing the definitions of motorized bicycles, and I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Your encouragement to offer maybe some change support to help with that equity, would that be part of something we would give to our lobbyists and be part of our legislative agenda?
Yes, you have not adopted your legislative agenda yet. This is an issue that came to mind as we were dealing with the STO, so we thought we'd raise it to your awareness in case it's an issue that you guys care about as well. It would impact a lot of people. Our chief of prosecution was telling me today about a 60-year-old woman that came in today that had this exact situation because she didn't realize her license had been suspended and had $8,000 in fines. It just doesn't seem quite fair that you get no jail time for a DUI, but jail time for second time driving on a suspended license.
Any discussion from the body of how they feel about that? If we could, I would ask Deputy Mayor.
In October, we will take up in policy and finance and look at that to bring back here,
Okay.
so we'll make sure it gets addressed. We
Great,
think it
thank
needs
you.
to be. Yep.
You take it to the league.
Do we know anybody?
Yeah. Know who to call? Yeah. Okay. We'll move on now. That takes care of all of our non-action items, and we get to agenda item number 6, public comment. And I want to make sure we give everybody time. I'm looking at it, it's 5 till 9. We should be able to, 5 till 9. We should be able to accommodate everybody to give them an opportunity during public comment without having to maybe extend our time for executive session. So we'll move to public comment. I'll call the names as they're listed on my list. Jonathan Sublett. Pastor?
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and City staff. It's true. I'm not from Topeka. I was not born here. I did not attend these schools. I grew up in South Oak Cliff, Texas, a neighborhood much like Highcrest. Education and faith made a difference in my life, particularly those involved in my educational journey who did more than the schools I attended paid them to do. They exposed me to things that my family simply could not. My mom didn't care any less than any other parent. She overcame a lifetime of trauma to get her GED when I was in 5th grade, and then went on to get her nurse's aid certificate, only to be disabled a couple of years later in a car accident. Sin and Fellowship Highcrest were not the beginning of a developmental spirit. While at the University of Tulsa with 20 or less African American students in the whole School of Engineering and Natural Sciences, I founded a chapter of the National Society of Black Engineers. I graduated and began working as a chemical engineer. I started my career off with Dow Chemical, the same company that I said I would work for while on a trip with my grandfather in the 8th grade. This is the same grandfather who was a World War II vet, who marched with Dr. King, whose funeral caused me to miss the August 19th policy and finance meeting where the two organizations I founded were discussed. During my last semester of seminary, I prayed for God to send me to a place no one else wanted to go, to love on people no one else wanted to love on. God set my heart on a part of our community much like Highcrest named Freeport. I fell in love with some kids I worked with that summer, and I sold my house and much of what I owned to move into their apartments so that I could further mentor the kids in that community. After almost 15 years as an engineer, I walked away from my once dream job to spend more time investing in those same kids in our community. After planning a church there, our treasurer stole money from the church, and then a hurricane hit my town. While helping to lead the recovery efforts for our community, I got a call. That call was from Topeka. I told 3 young black males I met on that trip that I loved them and would do whatever I could to help them, whether or not I came to Topeka. They cried. Later, my host told me that he didn't believe that those teens had ever heard an adult male tell them that he loved them. And while considering all the offers on the table, I couldn't shake the interaction I had with those 3 young men. So I convinced my wife that we were supposed to be here. It would not be easy, but it would be my next assignment. So no, I was not born here, but I am committed. I have a promise to keep that goes beyond projects and buildings and grants and all those other things. I hope my time here tonight helps to explain more about my belief that transforming place assists in helping people transform into their best selves. And no, I'm not unique. In Jeremiah 29, the prophet spoke to a group of people who had a series of unfortunate events take place, and it left them with a choice to make, to go where God was sending them or try to go somewhere easier. Jeremiah said that the true test of their faith would not only be their obedience to go to this hard place, but to work for its peace and prosperity. Why? Because as he states in verse 11, it would show that they trusted God's plan for their lives. Your job is hard, and in the same obedience that has me planted in Topeka, I will continue to pray for you as authorities of the city where I live. I will abide by your rule when it doesn't go against the word of God. I will seek to do what's best and work for the peace and prosperity of Highcrest, Topeka, Shawnee County, and the rest of Kansas. I will practice grace and forgiveness because I know that sometimes we say things that we don't mean and do harm that we don't intend to do. I will continue to teach that relationships are mended when confession is done around the wrong that was done, repentance, reconciliation, and restitution happen in the same circles in which it was committed. I will continually operate with integrity. I will trust God's plan for my life and the future of those I lead. I will be content with who he thinks I am. I will step aside when it better benefits those I love. I will stand in the gap at my own risk when it calls for it. I will not grow bitter. I will not go against my principle to achieve goals. I will not live a life hoping for Superman to transform my neighborhood because that's why God put me there. I will spend more time working on the solution than I do complaining about the wrong situations that exist. And I will continue to live out the promise made to me so many years ago.
My apologies for interrupting, but your time is up. Would you like to have more time?
Yes.
Okay, how much time more do you need?
About 30 seconds.
Okay. Is there
We'll give you a whole minute.
motion and a second? I think we can all say aye. Aye. Proceed.
I will continue to live out the promise made to me so many years ago by those who had nothing to gain but gave so much by investing their lives in so many. I will continue to choose Highcrest, and we will continue to see the place where I live transform. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, sir. as we move forward, we have quite a few people to speak. Try to be aware of your 4-minute limit, and if you get close to it and you think you're going to need extra time, just let us know. I think the body's been pretty indulgent, so to make sure that you're able to finish your thought as you want to express them here tonight. The next person is Jill Rice.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council members, and staff. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you tonight. My name is Jill Rice. I'm the Director of Ministries for Fellowship Highcrest. I'm also the NIA President for the Highcrest community. Tonight, I'm here to speak about my concerns for the ARPA meeting and application process, specifically the Policy and Finance Committee meeting that happened on August 19th. As I watched the meeting unfold, I grew more and more concerned about the process and that it was unfair for many of the organizations that had participated. Not only was it unfair, but I felt at points that it was just unprofessional. My first concern was that there was no scoring rubric for the application process, and the reasoning behind who got to move forward in the process and who didn't get to move forward was inconsistent and unclear. And when there was no scoring rubric used, it allowed for natural biases to be amplified. My next concerns are more specific in nature. There were comments made directly towards Fellowship Highcrest, and I'll speak to that first. See, we're commented to be the same organization as Sent Topeka, and we're not. We are separate. But there was no attempt to clarify if this was indeed true or not. It was also commented that our project, the Ford Center, was just for a recording studio. When in our application, there were many things that are part of the Ford Center, including a child care center, mental health space, office space, commercial kitchens, and a launching opportunity for entrepreneurs. And when other organizations were given the opportunity to fund portions of their projects or have questions asked and move forward, our organization was not afforded that same opportunity. And I saw other organizations that had childcare as a priority for ARPA funds move forward. Ours was not. And third, I would like to talk with you about Sent's request for $600,000 for Fremont Hill. This is a mixed income housing development project that Sent has been working on. The development will have 30 total homes in it, 20 of which are reserved for LMI families. Sent is actively fundraising, applying for grants and seeking partnerships and tax credits to help make these homes affordable and accessible for our neighbors. Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala, you commented that...
excuse me, ma'am.
Sorry.
You can't direct your comments to any particular governing body member.
Thank you, I appreciate that. It was commented that Sent was helping to gentrify the neighborhood, and that it was not... the homes that were being made available in the neighborhood should be focused on rehabilitating the homes that were vacant and abandoned in the neighborhood instead of building new homes. And that southeast side of Topeka shouldn't have new housing be built for them. And the Highcrest community has been involved in the planning of Fremont Hill at every step in the process. We are on board and, to my knowledge, not concerned about gentrification. May I have 30 extra seconds, please?
You still have a minute. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'm going to need 30 extra seconds.
Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead. You can finish.
In addition, this will not be the first homes that Sent has rehabilitated or constructed. Sent has purchased homes, rehabbed them, they've rented and sold them to families. Their LMI properties that they currently own are managed by the Topeka Housing Authority. They have market rate units as well that are managed by House Property Partners, and they are a city and state CHODO organization. This project was not given any consideration, although the committee did move forward CRC's request for $900,000 for affordable housing. Cornerstone had 2 requests move forward that addressed housing issues in the city of Topeka, and Habitat for Humanity also had a request move forward for affordable housing. Please hear me. I do not have an issue with these organizations moving forward in the application process. I think Topeka's housing issues are going to take all of the organizations working together in building new construction and rehabilitating existing construction to address our housing needs. My concern is that I feel like Sent was not given the same standard as the other organizations in this process. And so my main concerns and my main issues with the process is there was no scoring rubric for the applicants and no formal process for appeals. The council people made,
This is where you ask for additional time.
can I have 30 additional seconds?
One more minute.
Okay.
All in favor? Okay, go ahead.
There is no scoring rubric for the process for applicants and no formal appeals process either. Council people made unsubstantiated comments about organizations, and there was an inconsistency in how applications were passed through to the next round for consideration. My family lives and works in Highcrest. It is our home, and we plan on it being our home for quite some time. Over the years, Highcrest has been overlooked and passed by. Please do not allow this to be left behind again without consideration. Our community needs it. I hope that you will take into consideration the applications that were submitted by both Cent and Fellowship Highcrest through the ARPA process. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person is Tricia Sublet.
Good evening. My name is Tricia Sublet. I'm the mental health specialist for Cent. I thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I wrote out my thoughts in effort to respect my time limit and to be able to clearly articulate my thoughts and concerns. I watched the special council meeting that reviewed the ARPA applications and found myself confused and concerned about the process to determining which applications would go on for further review. The selection process had some inconsistencies. For example, the Boys and Girls Club application for HVAC repairs was not moved to the second round, but the application from the YWCA of Northeast Kansas for HVAC was. Naturally, I do not have access to read through the applications, but it is unclear why similar requests are treated in such a different manner. The bottom line requests are the same. Why is one agency afforded the opportunity to answer further questions and the other not? This brings me to my concern about how Cent's request for funding for the first phase of the Fremont Hill project was handled. This request was for $600,000, which would help cover the gap in funding, not pay the entire project, that is needed for phase 1 of this project. There were several other applications requesting funding for housing needs that were pushed through. Several other agencies were given the opportunity to answer further questions. Why was Cent not afforded this opportunity when the request was very similar? This is inconsistent. I also want to take the time to address some of the inaccurate accusations that were voiced against Cent. One comment was made about the concerns for gentrification. The essence and heartbeat of Cent's work is the exact opposite of gentrification. We, in fact, have clauses written into contracts with buyers to prevent and fight against gentrification. If we had been given the courtesy to answer further questions, we would have been more than happy to explain that in detail. Another comment was made about the need to build on existing lots within neighborhoods or work on rehab housing rather than new housing developments. Cent is a both-and agency, not an either-or. You see, we requested funding for this specific project, which is for a new housing development. However, our housing department works on new builds in existing neighborhoods. We are currently building our third, rehabbing housing for affordable rental units, and even curb appeal to assist homeowners in meeting city code compliance requirements. We do both and. We requested funding for one of the many different parts of our housing work. Had we been given the courtesy of further questions, we would have been more than happy to explain that as well. You see, the need for housing work to be done in Topeka cannot and should not be completed by one agency. We are not competing against other housing and development agencies in our community. Both and. We need their work and they need ours. We are simply asking for an equal opportunity. Highcrest is a traditionally lower income neighborhood that is higher in diversity. Is it used to not having an equal opportunity or voice at the table? I think yes. Does that need to change? Absolutely. But really, the lack of opportunity to be given a fair and equal shot at these one-time funds is my secondary concern. My first concern is the misinformation that was spoken about Cent. This misinformation appeared to be based on assumptions and hearsay. To my knowledge, no one has reached out to anyone at Cent to ask for clarification. These assumptions were then spoken in a recorded public setting to which many others viewed. This misinformation was slander to my place of work. This misinformation was damaging to the reputation of Cent, which then has a cost to the forward progress of my community and my neighborhood. I needed to voice my concerns about the process of the ARPA applications, but more than that, I needed that misinformation to be corrected in the same space and public record that it was discredited. You see, as a both-and organization, we believe that a win for Highcrest is a win for Topeka. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next person is Skylar Stewart. Skylar Stewart. In the room one more time, Skylar Stewart. Okay. Move on to Chris Hartman.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here this evening to speak regarding the denial of ARPA funds for two projects. You've heard them both discussed moments ago. I don't believe these projects were given proper consideration. I realize there was a specific timeline regarding ARPA funding and the projects. I understood that from the hearing that I listened to or the meeting that I listened to. I'm hopeful that you would see fit to move these two projects forward regardless of the decisions that were previously made. First, I want to address the request for $600,000 for the Fremont Hill project submitted by Cent. I'll be brief. During the review discussion, there were comments made about gentrification, references made to comments by other people. I don't believe this is a fair representation of what's happening in Highcrest now, where Cent has already been working. There is a proven track record of success with both new construction and remodels. There was also a comment made by one of the committee members about not needing more new houses, but rebuilding where houses once stood, which happens to be the model Cent has already been using. I did some simple math on some of the projects that were reviewed. One project was approved to spend over $200,000 for a duplex, another to spend $180,000 for 3 single-family units, $100,000 per residence, $60,000 per residence. The $600,000 Cent requested would have given you 20 residences. That's $30,000 per residence. If you're looking for bang for your buck, I think the math kind of stands for itself. I have since seen communication from one of the committee members that said the reason the project from Cent was denied was because they couldn't break ground promptly upon the award of the funds. Now, that's a reason I can understand. However, that reason was never given at the public hearing. So what it does make me question is the transparency of the entire process. If the reason for denial happened behind closed doors and not in public, what are we really doing here? Now, my primary purpose isn't to discuss Fremont Hill, it's to discuss the Ford Center and the denial of funds there. I've watched the meeting a couple times. I wanted to make sure I got my facts straight and heard what I think I was hearing. I have to tell you, I was shocked and offended by what I heard during the discussion of the Fellowship Highcrest. When the committee chair announced this project, he said $150,000 from Fellowship Highcrest for the Ford Center. Another committee member then spoke up and said, it's Cent. The chair again tried to say it's Fellowship Highcrest. The committee member said, no, it's Cent, it's for a recording studio. Now, she then said, I don't think it meets the criteria. The other two people agreed, and it was kicked to the curb, and that was really the end of the entire discussion. Now, I understand they had 80-some applications to read. This one clearly was not read because they said it was Cent. The word Cent appears in this application one time. The only time it appears in the application is to say that there would be no Cent presence in this project. What does appear in the application are 3 mental health offices, which were given as a priority, 35 seats in a child care, which one of the committee people specifically said a priority is, and I quote, child care, child care, child care. But yet this one was ignored. There are other things. There is a performance studio. There is a recording studio. But so many other projects were given the opportunity to designate how much of the ask was for this, this, and this project wasn't. I think it's just a horrible miscarriage of the process, and I would encourage you to move this project back into the question and answer stage. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Nikki Ramirez Jennings.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and City staff. And like Ms. Tricia, I'm going to read mine too for the sake of time, so I stay within my limit. My name is Nikki Ramirez Jennings, and I serve as the Executive Director of CENT. When I first learned about the outcome in regards to the ARPA proposal process, my initial reaction was to take offense. And this praying person was quickly reminded by whom I belong to and what I believe in, and that the posture I should maintain, and that is to be responsive and not reactive. And so I stand before you all today to respond that I understand that this process was complicated, that there were so many amazing organizations doing great things in an effort to make a difference and an impact. I understand that not everyone can be funded, and I recognize that there is value in CENT's work whether we do or do not receive funding. I have an awareness that this committee was put together to speak to what is best for all of Topeka. I understand that there were no official guidelines or rules to follow with this process, but instead provided were general directions on what the governing body would like to see prioritized. It was incredibly disconcerting that the process outlined in determining of who gets funding and who does not was completely subjective. Please help me understand why there was no rubric to help filter 85 applications. You mentioned that you were making one of two decisions for every project presented, and that was if the application moved forward or does not move forward. And there was also another decision that was shared, and that was the decision to share misinformation. It was shared that CENT is gentrifying the neighborhood, that CENT and Fellowship Highcrest were the same organization, and that we do not partner. I'm standing here today to share that CENT and Fellowship Highcrest are two different organizations, complete with separate office spaces and EIN numbers. They don't overlap any more than Target, who sells all the things pumpkin spice, and TJ Maxx, who also sells all the things pumpkin spice. Both organizations, CENT and Fellowship Highcrest, want to see the narrative change for the Highcrest community in the best way, just like Target and TJ Maxx both want to sell us all the things pumpkin spice. Case in point, it is possible for two separate entities to provide the same services and reside in the same space. Both CENT and Fellowship Highcrest both share the same building with other nonprofits who are also doing community-focused work. In regards to gentrification, I want to share with you that CENT has in place the first right of refusal within the contract deed, that CENT homes must be owner-occupied and homes are priced in a way that allows residents to afford the cost of homes and allows first-time buyers access to assistance programs. CENT has also partnered with several nonprofits and for-profits on nearly every single project we have done, whether it be financial or in-kind donations. This work is definitely not for Lone Rangers. CENT recognizes and embraces the opportunity to collaborate with other organizations. Lastly, I implore you to ensure you have the most accurate information before utilizing a public forum to spread misinformation. I just want to encourage you all that if there's anything you would like to learn more about in regards to CENT, please reach out, as I'm happy to share and fill in any gaps. I would like to also invite you to go to our website and read CENT's vision and mission and core values. One of our core values is redistribution, and that is what we are doing. We are taking the resources in the Topeka community and redistributing them back into the community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next person is Braille Watson.
Good evening, governing body. My name is Philip Braille Watson. I'm a proud citizen of Topeka, Kansas. First of all, I want to thank the council for their extensive time in allowing my community the opportunity to stand before you today. Thank you for all of the tireless and sometimes thankless work that you do on behalf of the city of Topeka. I grew up watching my aunt and other relatives go to the NIA meetings and work alongside our council members in East Topeka. I grew up in poverty, walked across town to Washburn University and got my undergraduate degree. Then I traveled to Spain and got my master's. Soon after, I left European touring opportunities and free room and board to return to Southeast Topeka. My reason for this was because I knew that not everyone from my community had the same opportunities I was afforded, and I wanted to have a hand in changing that. When I learned about CENT Topeka and the work that they were doing in Highcrest, as well as the local church body of Fellowship Highcrest, I thought this was my chance. I moved myself, my wife, and my twin daughters into the community. I volunteered at Ross Elementary with Fellowship Highcrest and Sent Topeka, helping to tell the story of the transformation, like how Sent built the first home in Highcrest in over 60 years, or how through mixed income housing, including LMI homes and rehabs, the community went from an intensive care to an at-risk on the county's health map for the first time, or how they provided mental health services and resources and more. I also watched Fellowship Highcrest work alongside Sent in a way that honored the dignity of their neighbors and addressed the needs that seemed delinquent in times past by doing extensive neighborhood studies and speaking with our friends and neighbors about what it is that they wanted and what it is that they needed. I gave up my time as a volunteer to tell these stories, and eventually I raised support to come on full time as a staff member of the church. I am intimately familiar with the hard work, the heart, and the careful planning that goes into the work of these two separate but often partnering organizations for the betterment of my community. As I watched the policy and finance meeting on the 19th, I was slightly confused. I assisted in the writing of the ARPA grant for Fellowship Highcrest, so I was aware of the guidelines and specifications. I also heard what the committee had stated they would use as how they would weigh the applications. However, as I listened, there seemed to have been a lot of sweat equity poured into the reading of the 80-plus applications, but no clear standard around the stated guidelines. So decisions of whether or not to pass an application on to the next phase for further questioning seem to boil down to each council person's experience or lack thereof with an organization and weigh less heavily on the application itself. I witnessed the Fremont Hill project get passed up on because it did not affect LMI housing. However, I happen to know that it actually did. One council person stated they were unfamiliar with the information in the packet and didn't take the word of another council person who, quote unquote, heard things about the organization. I saw the Ford Center, which is a Fellowship Highcrest application, be conflated with a Sent project and be labeled as innovative but not what these funds are for, despite the project's listed plans for sustainability, impact on local entrepreneurs, and extensive list of partners to help renovate a resource ravaged by COVID in the Brookwood community. This process felt unfair. Unfair to the council people who were left to make informed but ultimately arbitrary decisions. Unfair to the organizations that have been fighting for and finding success in helping the community of Highcrest for the last 4 years, and unfair to the citizens of Highcrest who have championed the city of Topeka as well as these organizations, who heard unsightly and untrue things stated about the partners with whom they walked with. I would like to ask for an additional 20 seconds,
You
please.
still have a minute. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I asked.
Oh, I thought, it was still
No.
yellow. Those. 1 minute. Okay, 1 minute. Go ahead.
Thank you. I ask in the attitude of fairness and in the interest of the good of my neighbors in Highcrest and the Brookwood community that the council please reconsider moving the Sent ARPA application around Fremont Hill and the Fellowship Highcrest application around the Ford Center to the next phase of consideration and questioning. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Okay, the next person I have is Cassandra Von Bonn.
Good evening, everyone. As I've been introduced, my name is Cassandra, and you've probably got my email last week about the same thing as my community members, my fellow volunteers and workers of Highcrest have all explained here today. Now, I just want to give you guys a little bit of information. And first, before I do that, I want to thank you for the work that you guys do as the city council for our city, okay? Now, when I sent that email, I told y'all why I felt the displeasure in the way that the ARPA funds were decided upon, or who was progressing, I should say, and who's not progressing. Now, with that, I'm going to read the rest of this, if you don't mind. I do believe that this whole process was a disservice to our entire city. As mentioned previously, there's no rubric at all to follow, and even though there was guidelines, it was left to the discrepancy of 3 people. Now, this might not be an issue if I looked into where each person came from. So we have District 2 in here, right, which is for the north and for Oakland area. We have District 6, which represents Central, and District 8, which represents the West. Now we're strategically missing 2 aspects, the South and the East. Where was our representation in this portion of it? Right? There wasn't any. Now, couple that with having no rubric, it leaves it open to perception of biased decisions. Now, whether that's intentional or not, that's what the perception was led to. So there's a couple applications that were for new housing, some were progressed, even not having any clear understanding of what the application was saying. However, it passed with, we will pass this and then ask questions for clarification. Or things were passed with multiple asks on an application and large funding with the idea of, well, we're going to pass these and then we're going to let them know that to provide them funding, they're going to have to separate this and we'll only do partial funding. Okay, not a big deal. Now, when I sent this email, I received a response from the chairman, who stated in regard, and I'm going to read this specifically so I don't mess up the words. In regard to Fellowship Highcrest, again, the majority of capital improvement projects did not move forward in this process for a variety of reasons from all areas of the city. The grant information provided on the application was broad, covering various services to be provided. While it looks wonderful, the grant did not outline long-term sustained funding that will be used to maintain the facility. That question is specifically asked. The funds being requested were being asked for renovations without providing specifics to what the renovations would be. Some specifics were included, but focused on the programming, not the actual renovations the funds would be used for. In the end, it made it difficult to prioritize this project over others. So why was this project, first of all, not provided or afforded the same opportunity to answer those questions? That's one thing. The second thing is that broad horizon portion of it. Why were we not afforded that opportunity to say, hey, you know what, we're going to ask those questions and see if they'll separate it and only fund the mental health, only fund the portion of the child care section? We weren't. Now, I do want to say that I respect this councilman for giving me the detailed response he did. I respected that, right? And we had an open dialogue. Although I disagreed with it, he gave me his reasonings behind it. But here's the thing. As I stated, if we would have been given that opportunity, you guys would have been able to see and made that decision clearly. And if you still decided that we didn't deserve the funding or the funding shouldn't go to our projects, so be it. But we were denied without that ability to clarify like others, as well as to get that option to separate. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Lassiter, you're next.
Thank you. Good evening to the governing body and all of you. I just stood to say thank you to your law enforcement and to our youth congregate. We had a major trauma in central Topeka, and I felt that the law enforcement really stepped up with respect, integrity, and they were empathetic to these young people. The gathering was quite a few young people, maybe from 25 years and under, and they were really traumatized. And I felt that the young people were respectful to the officers were respectful to the young people. I'm representing Community First because we always believe in community first. That can we have some input to help one another, and yes, we can. I also want you to know that we will be writing a letter to our chief about some specific officers. I don't want to name them or prioritize them right now, but they use some very common sense strategies in dealing with young people and young people that have a culture that they may not be familiar with or understand. And we even had maybe a rookie person, and another person took the privilege of clarifying, this is how they do it, this is how they celebrate a loss, although it may not be familiar to you, but this is the way it's done. And I will conclude with, once again, I appreciate a mutual respect for one another. There was an issue where it took all day to kind of clarify the crime scene. Young people were very anxious about that, and so I was able to kind of walk among them, and they respected me, and I appreciate that. But I said to them, I'm wanting you to know, because this is taking all day, these young people are going to bring back dinner. That's our culture. They're going to eat. They're going to stay here until this is resolved. And all of the officers were were cooperative and the young people were cooperative. So once again, thank you for what you do. I wouldn't want your job, but I do pray for you. Bless you and thank you again.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, the next person I have is Daniel Walters. Daniel Walters. The last person I have on my list.
You skipped a couple.
No, I didn't.
Okay, sorry.
Gotcha, see? Daniel Walters, just want to make sure. Okay. That concludes our public comment portion of the meeting. We'll move on now to announcements. Madam Clerk?
All right, for the September 13th meeting, we have 5 appointments. We have a presentation on the Uptowner parking garage. Consent agenda consists of 1 noise exception and 1 expenditure ordinance. Action items, we have the public hearing on the establishment of the South Topeka TIF District. We have a zoning ordinance for property located on Southwest 20th Park, east of Southwest Ashward Place. We have a PUD for, located at 2621 Southwest Buchanan. We have the ordinances on the standard traffic ordinance and the Uniform Public Offense Code. We have the resolution on the Uptowner parking garage, and then we have the appropriation ordinance for the 2023 operating budget. Non-action items will include the 2023 Special Alcohol Grant Fund recommendations.
Thank you. City Manager.
First of all, it's with great pleasure that I have the opportunity to recognize a city staff member. The Utility 2030 Collaborative announced the winner of its inaugural 2022 Women Who Spark Award. This is a national recognition for innovation and leadership and mentoring. And the city employee that received that national award is Sylvia Davis. So I don't know if she is still here, but
Earlier.
yeah, she was here. There will be a media release on this tomorrow, but it is a very impressive award.
Yeah, give her an applause and absence.
Next week is budget approval. Also later this month, as part of the police community findings or recommendations, TBD will have input sessions on their training. This is for their academy and ongoing training, but these are public input comment 2 sessions. One will be at Washburn Tech East, the other will be at Washburn University on the main campus. But those are out, be a little bit later this month, and we'll be putting out something on the media for that. And just a reminder, flu shots will be available soon, as well as COVID boosters, so please get vaccinated.
Thank you. Councilman Dobler.
I have nothing, Mayor.
Okay. Deputy Mayor.
Nothing tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Councilman Lesser. Well, this is going quickly. Councilwoman Hiller. Councilwoman Valdivia-Acala.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of things. One, I wanted to let folks know that the community garden in Oakland is getting ready in about 3.5 weeks to be a part of a program where we are planting 10 fruit trees, and we hope that they are going to be in the next 2 to 3 years bringing forth fruit so that all of our neighbors can enjoy. We continue to get more and more volunteers of all stripes, all familial status, colors, socioeconomic, et cetera, participating in the garden. And we've just received some good news of some support from Evergy for some native plants that we are going to be having there as well. Also, just wanted to, when it comes to the policy and finance and the ARPA funds, I know that the chair, Spencer Duncan, has been responding, and I've been forwarding, and I don't know if Hannah has or not been forwarding the emails directly to them, but I just wanted to make a couple of comments on this. First, I want to comment on Fremont. The High Crest neighborhood has been a focus of the city and community organizations for intensive resource allocations since 2003 and even prior. The Neighborhood Planning Guide outlines several tracks on improving the health of the area known as Avondale west of Highcrest. In that comprehensive report, it expressed caution with building on Fremont without first improving the health of the neighborhood that anchors it, which is Avondale West. Since 2003, we have not seen an improvement with the health ranking, and the 2020 maps indicates it is still in intensive care despite having programs and funding within the community. And I do have that report if you would like to see it. Plans were revisited in 2016 by many partners to build up Fremont, and after extensive land surveys, meetings with investors, community organizations, and the community, it was ultimately abandoned without being able to thoroughly investigate the reasons at this time and to ensure the ARPA dollars were spent in a timely manner as outlined by the federal government and as available to the people as soon as possible. This project, in my opinion, did not meet the standards to move forward. I also did say, make some comments, I think I was the one that did it, about gentrification. The whole gentrification issue is one that I think, we could all look into, because what I'm looking at is prices on some properties. I think there was a 32 Southeast Girard, where that was the house that was very, very large. I think it might have gone for over $110,000. And from my understanding, it was missing insulation. It was also missing handicap accessible ramp because one of the persons living in the house was handicapped. And the woman that purchased the home was basically utilized her life savings. That is from research that I have done. Also, when we look at the Ford Center, let's first and foremost know that there were numerous guidelines that we had to go by. And with the Ford Center, and for clarity, the Ford Center is located at 3601 Southwest 33rd Street. That is my understanding after having driven by. In the interim final rule established 3 categories within this eligible use were public health responses for those impacted by the pandemic, including the general public. 2, responses to the negative economic impacts that were experienced by those impacted as a result of the pandemic. And 3, additional services either as a public health response or a response to the negative economic impact of the pandemic for disproportionately impacted communities. The Ford Center is located in a neighborhood that is currently listed in recovery according to the 2020 health risk map. All surrounding neighborhoods are in the health category. So this would not even meet the criteria of what we are being charged to, and is not in the southeast side. The mailing address where you send information to is the Southeast Golf Park address, I think it is. But this address is actually for the Ford Center, is 3601 Southwest 33rd Street. Now, this is not a perfect process. This is a first process. I would just say commend Deputy Mayor Duncan for moving forward thoughtfully, professionally, and kindly in the way that he has. I don't think that unless everybody can look at those 80-some applications, the intense level of need that is out there. And I will, I can just say from my point of view, rather than doing housing that isn't even shovel-ready, as Deputy Mayor said, and isn't even a part of the whole amount that's needed, I don't think that this is what this governing body had set up that they wanted when they charged us with the responsibility for this committee. So thank you, Mayor.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will hold my comments to another day. I think they do a great job over there and have. And I lived over there when I was young, just turned 60, joined the 60 Club. So I've seen the progress and I've seen what they've come in and done. I've seen people pull out money to invest in that part of town that have never invested before. So, anyway, I'll save that for another day. I just wanted to shout out a couple people that turned 60. My sister cousin, Evelyn Flores, Patty, Monica, they had a big 60s party, and we look forward to having this big 70s party. So maybe that's why I couldn't get on, you know, my mute button and my video button, because my fingers ain't working like they used to. I don't know, I'll use it as an excuse, but just wanted to shout them out and wish them a happy birthday and many, many more.
Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I did want to say to the people that came and spoke tonight, I appreciate how measured your comments were. I appreciate that you guys know it's a tough process, and you know, I obviously wasn't on the committee, and you know, and we do. I will say, in general, we try to really respect what our committees do, because they do a tough job. I will be talking to, you know, a few of them informally and just seeing, you know, if there's things maybe that they want to, if there's something they missed in your application or something. Again, I cannot promise you anything will change. But even then, realize that even though we do generally respect a committee's decisions, they're just recommendations, and later on, we, as the body, ultimately approve those things. So, again, no disrespect to any of my fellow people up here, because it's tough when you have that many things. One thing about people, we're not perfect. I mean, if there's people involved, it's going to be messy, and it's going to be imperfect, and be no better if I was there, I'm sure. I did want to, my alma mater, Highland Park, had an important thing. Yes, won their first football game in several years, and that was great. That was, what's that? No, not 19 years. No, it was 7 or 8 years. But you know what though? You know, and now my kids went to Shawnee Heights, but my wife and I'd always go and sit on the Highland Park side when we were there. But I'll tell you what, those Highland Park kids, they were usually playing both sides of the field. I mean, they were playing every day on both sides. I mean, they played, you know, even though, you know, we were on the Shawnee Heights, you know, team, those Highland Park kids, they were working twice as hard because they had to play both sides of the ball in most cases. And anyway, good job, Scots.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Kell.
Well, kind of want to echo a little bit of what Councilman Emerson said. I will talk to my colleagues up here about some of the applications and see if there's any things we can look at. Also wanted to sit there and, as he said, we have 5As playing 5As now. So these kids have a fair advantage. I went to a high school that was a very low 6A, and going against Olathe, Shawnee Missions, and we had 50 guys on our whole entire squad. They had 50 guys per grade. And as a freshman, I played 4 games a week. As a sophomore, I played 3 games a week. As a junior, 2, and as a senior, 1. So it is very hard when you're saddled like that to try to compete against schools that cut kids even. And when you like he says, when one team has to play both ways and another team's allowed to cut players, it makes it very hard. So hopefully with the success that the 501s that left to go play in the 5As will boost them and let them learn and continue to love a game that many of us have played and we loved, and get to actually compete and know that you have a chance when you're walking in the building. The other thing I want to talk about is, well, 2 things actually. It's 2 silent disorders, silent conditions, silent ailments, silent disabilities. This is Suicide Awareness Month, and it's Pain Awareness Month. People don't know what people are dealing with physically when you have pain. I have a daughter that has major pain issues that doctors can't even tell her why she's having the pain. where it makes it harder for her to walk, and in high school, she had to do bowling and golf because she couldn't do any other sports. And then to learn that, in essence, it was by fault as a parent, because it's hereditary, it's kind of hard. And then how that can kind of also tie into the mental pain that people deal with, and also the physical pain that can drive people to possibly commit suicide. And to be there for people, because just because you can't see their pain, whether it be physical, emotional, mental, be there for them, because so many people want to sit there and say, well, you're just faking it, or you're okay, when you're not. It's a lot to deal with. I've dealt with it for years with my oldest. Learned a lot about myself when she went through pain management programs. I thought it was I was a catcher too long, or I hurt myself here. It's it's just pain that your body creates for no reason. So it's really hard to deal with. So those are two issues to make sure you look at people, and just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there.
Thank you. Councilwoman Nager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also wanted to go ahead and shed light on something else we're recognizing this September. September is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. This is an incredibly difficult situation to find yourself in as a parent, as a family member, as a friend. I just wanted to go ahead and share two different resources for people to look into. There's always the American Cancer Society, and the one in Kansas is specifically found at this website. Honestly, if you go to cancer.org, it wasn't the most clearly written of my signs, but cancer.org. And then an organization that did not move along in the ARPA fund process is Team Blake, and it is a local organization. And they support local families with children who are going through treatment and management, and they just kind of help to fill in the gaps wherever they can. Blake was a young boy who passed away from leukemia, and this is how his family has chosen to react to that situation. So foreverteamblake.com. If you're able to help, please do, because this is a huge undertaking emotionally, financially, and any support that you can extend is appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm going to just take a minute to say a few things. One of them, I think it's important that, as Councilman Emerson stated, that we recognize that the opportunity for our citizens to come before this governing body and speak to issues is something that is, I think, in many ways unique, and that's why I like local government. I don't think you get that opportunity very often when you go much higher up the chain to state government or federal government. So I think that is where I think both the satisfaction and sometimes the frustration comes with being involved in local government. But it's important that we keep that dialogue open. The respectful exchange of ideas and opinions is what keeps us moving forward. It helps us rethink and think even harder about what we do for the community. So I thank the people who spoke this evening. I thank the people who worked hard on those 80-some applications, because they obviously had causes and reasons to present themselves before this body for consideration. It's important to know that all of us as a body, and I'll speak for all of us, look beyond our district boundaries and look beyond what is good for just one area of town. Because all of us must be able to enjoy the fruits of our labor. And I know the people who have come before with those ARPA applications are doing the same thing. They're trying to serve a larger community and a larger group. So I am appreciative that I live in a community that has that many organizations that want to reach out and help their fellow citizens. This is the place to be if you want to be part of that community. So again, thank you for the effort. For the task of sitting on that committee, I've sat on a similar committee when it was the Social Services Grant Committee. And that was a struggle as much because everyone who came to us had the expressed need, and you wanted to be able to fund everyone but couldn't. So it's a task that sometimes doesn't get the recognition for how hard it is to make those decisions. I believe everybody on the committee was there to do good and did it in the best way they felt possible. I appreciate the leadership from the deputy mayor. I've sat in that deputy mayor's seat as well, and I know that sometimes it's uncomfortable. But you learn in that seat, and I think we all learned from this ARPA process. So those are my comments as I address what we heard tonight and what we continue to do for the city of Topeka, because I had a pleasant meeting this morning with one of the people who appeared before us tonight. And she gave me more hope in what we can still do. And so I asked her then, what's your plan B? Because that means you're going to continue to work hard and can continue to do the work you can, but maybe not in the way you had planned. So think hard, keep working, and thank you for your commitment to the city of Topeka. So with that, there is a need for us to move into an executive session. Oh, but I was getting to it if I could, okay? And my question to the city attorney would be, if we move into executive session, can we also include a motion to extend beyond our 10 o'clock? So, because we're going to go beyond that easily.
I think it would be cleaner if you made the first motion to waive the 10 PM rule and then the motion required under the open meetings law.
Okay, so do I have a motion to?
So moved.
Motion in the second, thank you, to waive the 10 o'clock time deadline. Those all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Sylvia? Thank you. Reliable, she's reliable. Okay, so now with that removed, we have a need for executive session if the city attorney would read.
The motion would be to recess into executive session not to exceed 1 hour to discuss candidates for city manager as allowed under KSA 754319BA. The following individuals may be needed to aid the governing body in its deliberations: Paul Bossard and City Attorney Stanley. The open meeting will resume in the City Council chambers.
Okay, we've heard the need to move into executive session. Is there a motion by Councilman Carroll, second by Councilman Dobler? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, Sylvia? Thank you. Okay, we are adjourned into executive session.